Yo, what's up guys? So today we are gonna see, what if Naruto was found bound in chains and got massive harem with all girls in Avatar Part 2. Hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start, go check out the author of this fanfic, Bardock92, link is in the description, and also subscribe to my channel, and like this video. Let's begin the video. Naruto walked down the looming hallways of the ship, the last in line of the group of 5, with a stray guard leading Azula who was second in line to the bridge where the Admiral Xiao lay in eager wait for her arrival. The hall seemed endless to Naruto, every going forward, and seemingly never ending, only to find one ending leading to the beginning of yet another hallway. A maze made of steel, a labyrinth of iron made to float on the open sea. The pathways seemed pressed upon, shutting him in almost, slowly approaching with a malevolent intent to smother him. He knew full well that the arts of genjutsu had long since been lost to the world he knew, and that no shinobi trickery was casting the illusions he felt in the recess of his mind. His own worst enemy was himself. He had been on a ship before, but never one as large as the one he had now boarded. Whether it was the claustrophobic environment within itself or his anxiety at beginning his new life that stirred his emotions was unclear, but whatever the case, he would continue amongst these steel paths, as long as he had the strength to. Another minute passed before they reached their goal, a bead of sweat noticeably shimmering down the side of Naruto's forehead in anticipation. Their path finally stopped at a steel door, which the soldier gracefully opened, and held open for Azula and her party. After a brief stride, the Fire Princess and her companions found themselves in the room of a rather large command center for the ship. It was much more spacious than the narrow hallways that they had treated beforehand, a perfect military checkpoint for overseeing a battle. The man at the front turned ever so slightly to see who had entered his den, only to turn full force when he saw the briefest glimpse of His Highness. He then had a customary bow in respect to the prodigy daughter of the Fire Lord himself. The man before them was rugged in stature, wearing a military outfit that obviously befitted a role of importance and had a sense of indomitability to it. The top of his hair was in a bun, while the rest of it seemed to trace off into massive sideburns that adorned each side of his face. His eyes looked determined and fierce. A strong chin accompanied by an almost sadistic grin showed that this man meant business. He seemed to give a double take in Naruto's direction, as hazel eyes met an azure eye accompanied by a pale green one. The blue sphere shone with an almost animalistic slit to it. This man stared at Naruto for little more than 5 seconds in curiosity, but then he quickly readdressed his interest to his princess before him. Princess Azula, welcome the Fire Nation fleet. It is an honor to have the prodigy child for Fire Lord Ozai aboard my vessel. I must admit you have arrived earlier than expected. Not that that is an inconvenience, of course. I assume your trip went swiftly? The Admiral commented, earning a small smirk from Azula and her friends in response. Even Naruto couldn't help but let out a small smile, knowing full well that Azula's trip had been far from normal. We ran into some complications, but it was nothing I couldn't handle. If anything, the delay we encountered uncovered something most interesting. Admiral Xiao, I'd like you to meet my newest companion, and possibly the greatest ally to the Fire Nation. This is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. He will be a great addition for us to have on our raid on the Northern Water Tribe, Azula announced proudly, as the long golden-haired boy stepped fully into the fray to meet the Admiral. They stared at each other for a moment or two, Xiao looking down at the newcomer from top to bottom with almost inspecting eyes. Naruto stood still, as a statue, not wanting to offend the military leader with any offbeat movement. I hope you take no offense to this boy, but you stand out like a sore thumb. Your attire, and most certainly your hair, certainly mark you with a unique presence if I do say so myself. Tell me boy, where do you come from? You certainly do not look like a resident of the Fire Nation, and your clothes bear no clear resemblance in affiliation to any of the other 3 nations. Xiao outputs casually, not once addressing Naruto by his name in the process. Naruto was slightly annoyed at being called a boy. He was far past the age of a prepubescent stature, and there was of course the further irony that he was thousands of years older than the man who addressed him as a boy. The sage chose to hide his slight irritation, however, instead maintaining a small smile that hid any ill will. Ty Lee went to open her mouth, but her jaw was quickly covered by Mai's right hand, as a muffled string of sentences whispered their way out of the cracks between Mai's fingers. An eyebrow raised in confusion, only to have Azula step forward and address the situation. Admiral Xiao, the matter of how I met Naruto, and where he's from is complicated, to say the least. For now, you'll just have to take my word that Naruto is indeed a powerful ally to be had. These words come from the prodigy child of the Fire Lord. You need not doubt them. He has abilities and powers I have never witnessed before. He has done things I thought not possible, even in regards to an avatar. Azula calmly claimed, earning a look of piqued curiosity from Xiao, who looked at Naruto with much interest. He cupped his chin with his left hand, only for a moment of thought before he respectfully replied, Indeed, the princess prodigy of the Fire Nation gives her support to this strange newcomer? I am not one to doubt the royal family's ancestors will be praised. However, you would not be offended if I said your claims were just a bit superstitious, my princess. If this man is to be such an important asset to this battle, as you claim, I respectfully asked him to show me some of these powers of yours that even you have not seen before, your highness. After all, if this man is to be our newfound ally, I must see at least a fragment of his abilities firsthand. I do not doubt your words, Princess Azula, but I must see at least a portion of it for myself. Xiao concluded, drawing small glare from Azula in the process. Something Mai entirely couldn't help but back up a few paces upon seeing. Xiao wasn't meaning to sound disrespectful. He implored more than enough that he meant the utmost respect for Azula's reverence, but questioning the royal in any way was often looked upon as heresy by the people of the Fire Nation. Naruto smirked casually, his fingers moving like spiders in preparation for what he was about to do. If the admiral wanted a small display of power, he would get it, but since he didn't specify about what he wanted it, the next move would be all the more satisfying. Performing a few hand signals in front of the group, Naruto extended his right palm openly at Xiao after the signs were performed, causing Xiao to back up a bit in anticipation. But no matter how he prepared himself, the admiral would have never known what would come next. Jirioka's Sataira Jutsu, Taimazu Fufuden Atsurioka. And with those simple words, Xiao literally plummeted to the steel form below. An illicit gasp of surprise escaped the mouth of Tai Li, while Azula and Mai watched in amazement as the admiral lay completely down the floor, not even on his knees, but like he had just lied down for a rest. The same thing occurred to all the fellow soldiers stationed in the same direction of the room where Xiao now lay on the floor. They too hit the ground faster than anyone ever could have thought possible. Many of the soldiers panicked, while Xiao was trying to force himself up, but to no avail. His muscles strained under an invisible force. He couldn't bring himself to his knees, let alone stand. After a minute or two of pointless struggling that amused Azula, as she held back a cruel snicker, he finally had the strength to speak again. "What did you do, boy? I can't move an inch of my body, nothing's responding like it should." Naruto rolled his eyes as he prepared to blow Xiao's mind and understanding of power. "If I may interject, Admiral, what I did was simply increase the gravity of your side of the premises by 15 times. What you and some of your crew are now experiencing is 15 times the normal gravity of Earth. If I applied any more pressure, all of you might spontaneously combust." Naruto smirked, earning a grim smirk from Azula and the widened eyes of Mai and Tai Li. Some of the soldiers started struggling even more so due to Naruto's explanation, desperately seeking a way off the ground, to which Naruto could only shrug at their ignorance. But how can one side of the room be 15 times the gravity of the other side of the room? That defies the laws of physics. I have control over what is unnatural in the eyes of your people, Admiral Xiao. Reality is mine to bend, as I see fit. I have the power to make nearly anything I want possible. For example, Jirioka's Sataira Jutsu, Zero Puresha. And then in what was little more than an instant, Xiao and his men literally began to float in the air, with even less control than they had before. None of them could properly stay on the ground without floating onto the ceiling or bumping into one another. To Tai Li it was like a constant airborne circus, something the acrobat was deeply amused and intrigued by. Xiao, on the other hand, was not amused, as he tried to regain his footing, and remarkably failed at each and every attempt. He couldn't help but snorted in frustration at the powers this boy was capable of invoking. He expected a show of power, to be sure, but what he and his men were experiencing now was almost supernatural. And now I've merely turned off the gravity on your side of the room. I can't imagine any of you can gain a foothold now due to any force of pressure literally being removed. What you're experiencing now is what outer space is like. There's no gravity there. It's like being a superhero 24/7 up there," Naruto exclaimed in an almost nostalgically childish fashion, earning very confused looks from literally everyone in the room. "You cannot be serious. What you're doing now is completely unheard of in any Fire Nation text, and now you honestly expect me to believe that you've surpassed the heavens themselves and traveled beyond the very stars?" Xiao practically grumbled, still failing to return to the ground in possibly the most awkward of ways. Naruto just shrugged and grinned at Xiao's challenge, ready to humble him once more. "I've just turned your world upside down, Xiao, literally. I'm showing I clearly possess abilities you, and most likely no one for the past thousands of years, has ever seen. Given what I'm showing you now, do you doubt I could make it to outer space? The only unfun part about space is that there's no air, so your intestines will implode from the inside in a matter of seconds if you aren't like me, which sucks for you because you can never go into space like I can," Naruto finished explaining, while Xiao just looked at the boy questioning if he was actually telling the truth or if he was an escapee from a local asylum. "Anyway, time to have you back on the ground now, Jirioka Jutsu, Seihoka." Naruto started after performing a small number of hand seals, which sent Xiao and his men plummeting into the floor, much to Tai Li's amusement, as the acrobat burst out in laughter while Azula stifled a chuckle. Xiao growled slowly in irritation, as he and his fellows tried to regain their footing, stumbling a few times in the process. As their balance returned, such constant adverse changes in their central gravity had taken a slight on their sense of perspective. Dusting himself off from the small amount of dirt that littered the steel floor, Xiao looked at Naruto with a sense of not only respect, but perhaps at what hinted at as a bit of jealousy, and maybe even anger. It would seem Her Highness's claims are not in the least exaggerated, boy. Your powers are quite unique. I have never seen talents before in all my years in the military, nor have I even heard of them. You speak a language I've never heard before, as well. This implies that you are indeed a foreigner, but regardless of your affiliation, what strange land you come from, as long as Her Royal Highness Azula regard as such an important asset, I will not question your being here. Xiao stated officially in a somewhat respectful tone. He refused to address Naruto by his name, but he had clearly learned that Naruto's powers were indeed as powerful as they were mysterious. Your Highness, if we maintain our current schedule, we will arrive at the Northern Water Tribe in the next 2.5 days. Our fleet has gathered itself to its maximum percentage. Every ship and frigate is ready for battle. Xiao commented in an almost gruff-sounding voice, a small indication of bloodlust evident in his voice. Excellent work, Admiral. Signal for the fleet that we're ready to cast off ASAP. I trust our quarters are ready for arrival? Azula said. Of course, Your Excellency. I had them prepared for only the most noble of commendations. It's one hall down from where we are now. Xiao started with a wide smile across his face, hoping to gain some brownie points by treating the daughter of his Fire Lord with the same accommodations she was given in her castle. Tai Li and Mai looked at Naruto with a look of question and possible concern, to which he merely shrugged. Mr. Xiao, where will Naruto be staying? He is within our company after all. Shouldn't he get a room too? Tai Li questioned, hoping not to offend Azula by possibly speaking out of line. Before Xiao could retort, Azula spoke up to answer her question. Naruto can sleep in the same room as us, Tai Li. I'll have the Admiral prepare for an additional bed to be brought into our quarters. That won't be a problem now, will it, Admiral? Azula questioned in an almost demanding tone, having Xiao tug against his necktie area while he cleared his throat. Oh, of course not, Your Highness. I will be sure it is done at once. This boy has displayed the remarkable powers that I now see will be a great asset to the upcoming battle. We need not have him share the same accompaniment as common foot soldiers. Xiao responded. Oh, and Admiral? Please call Naruto by his name. He clearly deserves at least some method of respect from you. He is clearly a man, not a boy like Suzu, Azula said with a hint of respect for the golden-haired sage evident in her voice, to which Naruto couldn't help but slightly smiled that the royalty of this time was already giving him a bit of respect. He noticed Mai fidget slightly at the name of Zuzu, something he would question her about later. Yes, of course, Your Highness. If you wish for Naruto to accompany your quarters, I have no right to question it, Xiao said. Good. Now then, if you need to speak with any of us, Admiral, we'll be in our quarters, Azula said calmly, as she turned to leave. Her companions, including Naruto, had already turned to leave, and were practically walking down the hallway now. As Azula entered the doorframe, a small cough from Xiao stopped her. Yes, Admiral? Your Highness, now that we are alone, I feel more comfortable speaking with you. With all due respect, you have not mentioned how you or your companions met Naruto, to begin with. His abilities that you have witnessed, while I thought to be merely an exaggeration, have been proven real, as mysterious and powerful as they are. While I should not have doubted your reverence for his strengths, you will forgive me if I question whether or not he is our ally. Xiao started with a tone of authority. Azula's eyes squinted in a small amount of anger even as her back faced the Admiral. He is clearly a foreigner who wishes to serve our great nation. While this is the first step of what the Fire Nation hopes to accomplish, to have all the other nations bend to us, is it really wise to accept him so freely despite his abilities? He looks nothing like any resident of any nation I've ever seen. The way he dresses himself, accompanied by that long, flowing golden hair of his, make him stand out like a sore thumb amongst any normal people. How can we be sure he is even a resident of any of the bordering nations at all? Perhaps he is from a foreign yet to be explored. He could be the first of many from a native land lying in wait to declare war on us when we are most vulnerable. And even if he is from one of the other nations, what's to say he won't betray us from the inside once he has our trust? The Admiral finished, while Azula lightly clamped her hands in frustration. Admiral? Yes, Your Highness? Naruto is to be respected, not only as a member of this ship, but as one of my companions, and as an ally to this nation. He holds many secrets within him that will grant great honor, good fortune, and endless power to the Fire Nation. I will not have such an advantage swindled by jealousy and suspicion. Do I make myself clear? Yes, Your Highness. I will explain the origins of how I met Naruto, and where he is truly from after our victory over the Northern Water Tribe. Until then, you are to not question him in any way. Of course, Your Highness. If you need me, as admiral, I will be in my quarters accompanied by fellows. Azula calmly walked out of the room afterwards, calmly shutting the door behind her. She couldn't help but smirk as she left and wandered down the hall. Getting under people's skin was ever so satisfying. It was even better when they were of a so-called importance, and yet they couldn't do anything about her due to her station. Xiao, on the other hand, was less than pleased. As soon as he was sure Azula wasn't close enough to hear, he huffed in audible frustration. A small fire grew in his hands out of irritation for the scenario that had confronted him. This is more than annoying. After so long of trying to prove myself to His Majesty, I finally have the chance to stand beside the princess of our great nation, the prodigy child of the Fire Lord Ozai himself. A chance to bask one of the greatest victories our nation has yet to have against those water tribe animals. An opportunity to show the ingenious, cunning, and brutality of our resolve. And then, the people would talk of how Admiral Xiao and Princess Azula led the charge on that fateful day, and how we would emerge as heroes from the wreckage in the eyes of our people, and how I would be personally rewarded by His Majesty himself. And now this, right when I have the opportunity to redeem myself for my failures over letting the Avatar escape again, and to bring honor and glory to my people, an outsider steps into the fray. This boy, whether he has the approval of Princess Azula or not, is very, very dangerous. The abilities he just displayed to me are unlike any type of bending I have ever seen or heard of before, and I doubt that he showed me even the minimal amount of what he can truly do. Not only is he a potential threat to the Fire Nation, but he marches aboard my vessel with the approval of the Fire Lord's daughter, humbles my men, and I with unknown powers, and will be taking part in a battle that was supposed to be my defining moment of glory. If he can prove himself of use to this battle, then I will be willing to accept that, but he will not steal the honor and privilege being the deciding factor of this battle. That right belongs solely to Her Highness, and I. Not only will that day be a great victory for the Fire Nation, but it will also result in the destruction of the Northern Water Tribe, a symbol to all who would defy the Fire Nation of our path to greatness. And most importantly above everything, there will be cheers across the capital, as the rest of the world cries out in despair that the Avatar has fallen at long last, and that wretched legacy of altruistic defenders will have finally ended. The people of the Fire Nation will forever tell tales about the admiral named Xiao, the man who dealt the killing blow to the Avatar in his last waking moments. I will be known as both a hero and a champion of this great nation, and His Majesty will finally see me in the light I was born to be in. And best of all, that sniveling disgrace of a son of his will be brought to the stage on his final failure. With the Avatar dead at my hands, Zuko will never have the chance to redeem himself in the eyes of the nobles or, more importantly, His Majesty. I will be the hero champion of the Fire Nation alongside the mighty prodigy Princess Azula, and no one, especially not some sun-haired teenager, will steal this honor from me. It would be quite a tragedy if an accident were to befall him during the battle. We shall see what opportunities time brings. Meanwhile, Azula and her companions had made themselves comfortable in their quarters. The room was much like how Azula had remembered her quarters back at the palace. Xiao had not exaggerated his claims about making her feel at home. It looked as if the room had been decorated for noble accompaniment, filled with the finest room decor fit for royal blood, as well as any they wished to accompany them. A small desk, and accompanied by a large mirror, sat to the left side of the room, complete with a stool so anyone could address their looks in the ways that they wanted. A large bed near the middle to back of the room, decorated with the same furnishings of Azula's resting place at her home, laid suitably down for her to rest. Since the bed was so large, and the room itself was rather compact, Azula had agreed with Tai Li's statement that the girls could sleep together on the same mattress. While a seemingly intimate notion, Azula looked upon sharing her resting place with her friends as little more than courtesy. Even though she would never admit it, she highly revered both Tai Li and Mai as the only two people she could really connect with. She just could never click with anyone on the outside world or in her father's court. Tai Li saw the bed-sharing event reminiscent of the slumber parties they used to have when they were little, and snuggling with Azula always made her feel warm inside. While Mai had grown used to sharing a bed with her friends, since they were considerably older now, she felt the act was more intimate than it let on. She only prayed that Naruto wasn't a pervert who would try to take advantage of the situation. If he did, she was ready to lodge a knife in between his legs to make her point. Naruto's bed had already been dragged in swiftly by two accompanying soldiers, who left in the right side corner of the room with as much distance from Azula's bed as possible. It was not as royal as what Azula and her friends had been given, but it was of much better stature and condition than what the common soldiers were given. The young sage entered the room with a small smile on his face, taking around the surroundings of his quarters. Mai sat on the stool and laid her back against the desk. Azula sat comfortably on her bed, and Tai Li was meditating at the end of the mattress. I'm surprised, even with your authority, Azula home, that you managed to get Admiral Xiao to agree to let me share the same quarters as you and your friends. I thought he'd be a little bit more protective, that's all. Naruto chuckled nervously, as Azula gave him a small questioning look. What do you mean by Naruto? What exactly are you trying to imply? Well, how do I say this without offending you? Naruto quipped, as he scratched the back of his head trying to find a way to explain the situation without having a foot end up in his groin. It didn't take Azula long to get the picture, however, as a small blush creeped across her face. Ty Lee and Mai, who had been listening in, couldn't help but blush as well. Just because you're in a room with 3 girls, don't get any ideas out of it, Naruto. Mai commented with a cold tone, making Naruto gulp in a tad bit of fear. He knew pissing off a female, young or old, was always an incredibly foolish idea, and to have to share a room with 3 of them could be more of a curse than an envisioned godsend. Even though his former sensei was quite the pervert, and would most likely try to take advantage of the situation, Naruto knew that for his general safety he would keep his hands to himself, lest he lose his manhood, end up a burnt corpse, and be thrown overboard to the passing sharks. Azula coughed lightly to break up the tension, clearing her throat to speak again. Even if Xiao disapproved of the 4 being together in the same room, he couldn't do much about it to begin with. I'm the daughter of the Fire Lord, he's only a fleet admiral. Plus, even if you were involved with any of us, Xiao really wouldn't have a say in any of it anyway, Azula commented casually, trying to hide her light blush about the thought of more primeval, carnal actions. Azula, do you mind if I ask you a question? Naruto asked politely. I don't see the harm in it, so ask away. Who's Zuzu? There was a small silence that overtook the group, with Azula bearing an almost sadistic smirk, as Ty Lee grinned wildly. Mai was trying to hide an evident smile, and maybe a small blush, something Naruto had noticed. He scratched the back of his head awkwardly, as he sat down on his bed, wondering if he had stumbled on a bad topic. Zuzu, or rather Zuko, is the son to the Fire Lord Ozai, and my older brother, though by how far fate has separated our paths I dare say we aren't related at all. Azula practically chuckled, earning a puzzled look from Naruto. You see, Naruto, Zuzu is what we call the runt of the litter. Even though he's my older brother, and was born before, and even has a higher claim to the throne, he's an absolute disgrace to my family. He's soft, gentle, and fragile. His airbending skills are only of average skill, while I was born a prodigy. Do you know how disgraced my father felt when he learned his eldest child had such little potential? And then one day, my brother crossed the line, and dishonored my father in his own throne room. He learned his lesson that day. He never forgot never to cross our father ever again. Azula noted darkly, something Ty Lee shivered at, and Mai couldn't help but wince at. Naruto was oblivious to what this prince had suffered, and decided to let his curiosity take over. How was he punished exactly? NaruHarem. In my time, when a ninja dishonored his or her village to a heavy extent, they would be exiled from said village. An ex-nin is looked upon as an embodiment of dishonor and shame, Naruto commented, earning a small smirk from Azula in the process. Well, it is apparent your people, or rather my great ancestors, were as wise then as they are now. Zuko was not only struck by father to forever scar him, as a mark of his failure, but he was exiled from the Fire Nation as a whole, as a reminder of his weakness. He was never to return to his homeland unless he found a way to redeem himself in the eyes of our father. Now that the Avatar has appeared, the Fire Lord has learned that Zuzu has attempted many times to either capture or kill him to regain his honor. Azula sighed, stroking her fingers through her way before continuing on. Though not to my surprise, Zuko has failed over and over and over to catch the Avatar. Even when he has come close to getting him, he still manages to screw it up. It's become evident to my father that Zuko is what I said he always was, nothing but a failure. Even Admiral Xiao, the fleet commander of the Fire Nation's flotilla, has failed in his attempts to capture this Avatar almost as many times as Zuzu. That's why my father dispatched my friends and I to assist Xiao in this campaign to destroy the Northern Water Tribe and capture or destroy the Avatar. Azula finished in an adamant tone, as a small smile traced across Naruto's lips. And then you found me, Naruto added softly, as Ty Lee's eyes perked up. Yeah, then we found you, and I'm starting to feel pretty glad that we did. You were down there for like forever, and it looked really painful how you tied up. And now you have the chance to live your life again. And this time, you have us friends from the get-go, Ty Lee added in her usual optimistic, cheerful note. Mai couldn't help but roll her eyes, as Azula chuckled softly. Yes, I am glad to have such a warm welcome to this new world, Tai-chan. I never had many friends until much later in my life, and then I awakened into this new world to find that I have friends from the very beginning. It's almost a little unnerving, Naruto replied happily, making Ty Lee's grin grow wider in the process. You say your brother Zuko is not only a disgrace to your family line, but a failure compared to you in the art of firebending, as well. Forgive my possible insubordination to Harem, but I wish to meet him myself before I make such judgments, Naruto quipped in almost stern tone, earning a bemused smile from Azula, and a surprised look from both Mai and Ty Lee. Not many people would stand up to Azula in any form at all. To see someone even attempt such a feat was a rarity within itself. Do you doubt what I say is true, Naruto? After all, we are allies, are we not? Azula remarked. Of course we are, Mai Harem. We are allies, and more importantly, we are friends. However, as I mentioned beforehand, I need to meet your brother myself before I make such judgments about him. I was once considered a failure myself, as were many people I once knew, but we strived to be more than what others saw us as, and in the end, we accomplished being so much more than what we ever thought we could be. Naruto replied, earning a questioning look from Azula for his reasons. You were considered a failure by Naruto? I doubt that your abilities are unique, as they are powerful. Such strength demands respect, stated the Fire Princess. Naruto chuckled softly in response, looking at his princess with his one good eye. You'd be surprised, Azula. At a time in my life I was little more than a mischievous child with hardly any potential. I was more of a prankster than I was a prodigy, something you apparently had, or rather have the luxury of being. My abilities were petty, and my strength was poor, but I worked to become the man I am today, and now my power shines brighter than ever. Naruto replied strongly, earning small smiles from all the females in the group. The sage chuckled once more, recalling something from his past life. When I think about it now, Azula, it's actually pretty funny. If I had concentrated hard enough earlier in my youth, perhaps I could have prevented the disaster that accompanied my past. I could have been better prepared for the man who threatened to destroy the world and make it his own. But my time in the past is done. I can only look towards the future now. I may have failed then, but I will not fail now. Naruto replied in a fiercely determined voice, startling the females a bit with his strong outburst of bravado. Your determination is admirable, Naruto. I can respect that in a man, that he follows what he believes in, no matter where his path may take him. It is the trait of fools, but sometimes that of the occasional hero, Mai remarked, earning a small smirk from Ty Lee. I never knew you were so poetic, Mai. I never figured for the time to be into that kind of stuff. Usually your aura is kinda bland, Ty Lee stated in a somewhat nervous tone, scratching the back of her head as she struggled to find the words to describe her friend's demeanor without insulting her. Mai shot a small glare her way, while a bemused Azula and Naruto chuckled softly at Ty Lee's innocence. Trust me, Ty Lee, when you're surrounded by nothing but a bunch of old fools arguing in a courtroom over who has the right to lay claim to a watermill, but hundreds of years ago, there's really nothing to do but read. Mai quipped in an almost dry tone, earning a sympathetic look from Naruto. Before anyone could decide on what to say next, Naruto noticed that a certain pink acrobat had been fiddling with her fingers for a while. Not unlike a certain Hyuga had come to love too little too late. It had become increasingly obvious that she had a question for him, but was either too nervous to ask or didn't want to sound intrusive, and wanted to relay it in a more appropriate manner. Naruto, can I ask you a question? I mean, if that's okay with you, that is. Ty Lee nervously chuckled, earning questioning looks from her friends while Naruto merely rolled his eyes in response. He had a feeling what her question was going to be. He knew it was only a matter of time before someone from the current world asked him about it. Let me guess what your question is, Tai-chan. Is it if I have had a girlfriend in my past life? Naruto grinned adamantly, the uppity gymnast blushing a noticeable pink in response. Mai merely face-palmed while Azula rolled her eyes at Ty Lee's typical behavior. The Fire Princess was actually surprised she hadn't asked the young sage sooner. How did you know I was going to ask you that? You can't read minds, can you? Ty Lee stated in a sarcastic notion, earning a bemused look from Naruto, which had the trio of females almost gaping. You're kidding, please tell me you're kidding, Ty Lee said almost nervously, knowing full well that if she ever had any perverted thoughts about any scenario, that he could possibly know full well the extent of her feelings. I can't read people's minds fully if that's what you're asking, only partially. My training as a sage later opened up certain doors for me that allowed me to read people's minds only at a subconscious level, meaning I can get the gist of what a person is thinking, but not in complete detail. Naruto explained, earning an astonished look from Ty Lee and Azula, while Mai couldn't help but smirk. Is there anything you can't do? Mai practically chuckled, which Naruto let out a hearty laugh in response to. Come to think of it, Mai-chan, there's not much I really can't do. I'm pretty savvy in the arts of carpentry and blacksmithing, and I can sing and play instruments pretty well. Not to mention I learned how to cook to what I'd say is a pretty damn good mastery over it, Naruto replied honestly, to which Mai rolled her eyes humorously in response to the newfound wonder boy she and her friends had come across. And then there's the fact that over time I actually mastered the art of flight itself. Let me tell ya, it was a pain in the ass to figure out. I still can't fly at leisure though. Flying takes up a lot of my energy, leaving me vulnerable for a bit after I descend. I remember the first time I thought I mastered it. I flew so high I actually went through the atmosphere and ended up in space. Naruto heartily chuckled, earning shocked expressions from the group of girls. They had been present when he had mentioned he went to a place beyond the stars before, but it was hard to tell then whether he was telling the truth or just bluffing to make Xiao feel minuscule. But given how casually he was expressing his adventure, there was actually some inclination to believe him. It's a good thing the Kyuubi's chakra actually gives off a coating of oxygen. Otherwise, as I mentioned before, I would have internally imploded. Apparently it's a very excruciating experience from what he told me. I'm guessing he might have thrown one of his rivals into space one time when he was pissed at him. Getting back down was the real pain though. I forgot about orbital reentry. I walked funny for at least 3 weeks after that. Falling over 100,000 feet at 17,000 miles per hour burns like hell. Naruto remembered not so fondly, rubbing his backside in memory of the severe burns he suffered to his rump from the collision of his superheated anus hitting the earth. Azula just stared at the teen in wonder, struggling to believe if what he was claiming was true or not. Sure enough, this man had accomplished things she would have not believed physically possible in her lifetime. But could he have really survived a fall from the heavens themselves at such immeasurable speeds? It didn't seem humanly possible. Then again, Naruto himself didn't seem all that human to begin with, given how he informed her and her friends of how he quite literally had his own inner demon. Come to think of it, let's get back to your question, Tai Li, on whether or not I had a girlfriend in my past life. Yes and no. I mean, once my home made it public knowledge that I was the son of one of the greatest shinobi who had ever lived, and the greatest leader of our village, you can bet your ass that I had arranged marriages trying to be set up for me all the time by politicians who wanted to profit from it in some way. The leader of my village, Senju Tsunade, put a stop to that before it even began though. She wanted me to choose my own wives, and for my own wives to choose me, which is in a sense ironic since Tsunade-chan herself ended up becoming one of those tragically short-lived partners of mine. But to get to the point, and answer your question, no, I did not ever really have a girlfriend relationship to speak of. Hell, I never even had a wife to speak of. Naruto finished, crossing his arms akin to an almost disappointed pout. Tai Li looked at him questionably, as did her friends, to which Naruto quickly noticed due to the silence in the room. You had wives? Mai asked curiously. As in more than one? That seems a bit strange. Azula mentioned just every bit as curious as her friend. She had known that on rare occasions a man was allowed to have 2 to 3 wives, but even then those men were usually of noble status, and even having a second wife was enough to raise a few eyebrows. I didn't really have wives though, girls. The marriages that were arranged never happened since the 4th Shinobi World War ended up with the complete devastation of the world due to Madara's Eye of the Moon plan. I actually never ended up getting married like I was supposed to after the war, due to the fact I was probably literally the only human being left alive on the planet. Naruto stated grimly, reminded of his past failures at stopping the Uchiha man. Sitting up from her bed after her legs had gone numb, Azula yawned slightly and looked over at her sun-haired companion. How many wives were you supposed to have anyway, Naruto? 2, 3, perhaps even 4? Azula questioned inquisitively, a small smirk appearing on Naruto's face in the process. Well, let's see, counting my village, the separate villages, foreign continents, and distant countries, I would have had approximately 8 wives, Naruto recalled, as he finished counting his fingers, allowing Azula and Tai Li to gape in shock while Mai practically spit out her freshly made herbal tea. 8 wives? Isn't that a bit much? How could one man hope to be a husband to so many women, not to mention foster the amount of children each wife would want? Azula practically choked out, as Naruto laughed in a hearty manner in response. Trust me, Azulaheim, I never got the chance to find out any of your questions. Remember, I never actually got married to any of them. Everyone kinda died before that could happen. Though I can see what you mean. Looking back on it now, it does seem pretty overwhelming. Not to mention I'd have to keep up with rudimentary schedules of each clan like Naruto pondered, scratching his chin in wonder about how such large details skipped over his mind. Didn't your past life, or should I say the Fire Nation's past in general, have any shame? Such an amount of wives seems a bit sacrilegious. Marriage is supposed to be a sacred bond between a man and a woman in singular tense. There have been a few cases where the nobles in the Fire Nation were allowed to lead at least 3 times, but such polygamy always raises quite a few eyebrows whenever said case shows up. Mai stated, I guess things were different for Hai no Kuni in my day, Mai-chan. The CRA, or Clan Restoration Act, often saw what I have described to you. People of noble birthrights often had the Clan Restoration Act enacted upon them, though that was usually only if they were more or less one of the last members of their said clan. As both the heir to the Uzumaki and Namake's lineage, the CRA was enacted upon me when it was made public knowledge to the world that I was the son of Konoha's famous Kiroi Senko, the yellow flash of Konoha, Namake's Minato. You can bet your bottom dollar that when everyone found out that I was the son of possibly the most powerful shinobi ever known, Every politician wanted their daughter or niece to be wed to me in order to reap the riches of the Uzumaki and Namikaze's fortunes. As I said before though, Tsunade-chan put a stop to that before it began, and ironically became one of my wives herself. Not only was having so many wives considered necessary for a person of my stature, but many people actually outright demanded it so I could restore the clans that were both the legacy of my Ka-san and Tu-san, my mother and father, respectively. Such bindings of husband and wives between nobles in my time were not uncommon as NaruHarem. In fact, it was usually a rarity for a member of a noble household not to have more than wife, even when said member didn't have the Clan Restoration Act enacted upon him or her. A woman by the name of Karen who came to me was of no noble lineage, but there was much pain and suffering in her eyes. She had been used and abused by a man who was once my ally, who had betrayed me long ago. Karen saw me as the exact opposite of what he represented. All she wanted was someone to love her and treat her as an equal. Despite my initial suspicion, I gave her a chance despite her old ties to the bastard that shall not be named. Needless to say, Karen passed my expectations, and I came to know her as the wonderful woman that she truly was. I was supposed to have joint rule over both Konohagakure and Kirigakure due to the marriage to both Tsunade and Mei-chan respectively, which would have also made a pseudo-Mizukage and Hokage at the same time. Following the marriage to Temari would have given me some root of power in Tsunagakure due to the fact Temari was the sister of the Kazakage-gara, and both the Tsuchigumo and Hyuga clan I would have eventually had control over due to the union between Hinata, Hataru, and I. Finally, both Nadeshiko village and Hashigakure would have been more or less under my control. One of the women who came to me in hopes to be one of my wives was Shizuka, the future queen of Nadeshiko village, who I met previously, and ironically enough, convinced her that she shouldn't set out to marry due to some stupid law set forth by her village that she had to marry the apprentice of the Sannin Jiraiya, my former sensei. And Hashigakure was actually thinking about taking a vote to proclaim me its Rokudame Hashikage when I liberated them from the oppressive tyranny of their self-proclaimed Yandame Hashikage, Akahoshi. The votes were eventually tallied, and they all united in favor of me becoming their next leader, much to the disdain of the Konoha Council, who still saw me as only the reincarnation of the Kyuubi despite all I had done for the village. The only thing that needed to be done in order to cement the alliance was for me to join in union with one of the women of their village, and I chose Hokuto-chan, a dear friend of mine I made when I spent time in Hashigakure formerly. She agreed quite happily, which I was surprised to at first, probably because I was too dense to realize that he had a crush on me for a long time. Naruto half-heartedly chuckled, realizing all the opportunities he had wasted with people who had admired from afar. Had he realized their affections for him sooner, things might have turned out differently. Naruto, is what you say true? If what you claim is indeed true, then that means your political power in the world after this war of yours would have been quite formidable. Having such status over so many different places at the same time, if you had been able to claim such a hold over the world afterwards, then you would have had quite a considerable amount of control over the world, possibly. As much as my Azula stuttered, not thinking that such a feat was possible. Then your father, Azulaheim? If the current fire daimyo of this time, Fire Lord Ozai, is indeed the feudal lord over Hai no Kuni, then I would suspect by now he would have made admirable progress in this new war with the Avatar. If not, then that is most troubling, especially if he has limited reign over lands other than his own country. When a daimyo of one of the nations declared war on a foreign land or lands outside of his or her own territory, the assault would usually be quite swift, and the war would be over in a matter of a month or two. But I sense doubt in you, Azula. It's written on your face. By your body language, I take it this awakened avatar had been active for a while now. If so, then it is all the more apparent that not only Admiral Xiao and you have failed as many times to stop him, as you have told me, but I'm guessing Hai no Kuni forces in general have been unable to locate or stop this avatar? As I said before, I'm usually not a very judgmental person, but such a string of failures seems rather unusual. Azulaheim, Naruto calmly stated, not wanting to arouse the flames of Azula's wrath. He knew that Azula had given him the right to voice his opinion, but she was still the princess over his homeland, and therefore had the right to judge him for such honesty. Azula sighed in an almost equally calm manner, as she lightly clenched the sheets of her bed. I agree with your statement, Naruto. The failures of our nation in capturing or destroying this new avatar have been not only a setback in our goal to unify this world, but it is inexcusable when the Prince of the Fire Nation and one of my father's most revered commanders failed to stop a supposed messiah. When our raid on the Northern Water Tribe begins, I assure that we, as comrades, will end this infernal altruistic legacy forever, and bring true unification to this separated world. Azula responded determinedly, earning a raised eyebrow from her friends, and a small smile from Naruto in the process. Determination and pride It is good to see that the current royalty has not lost touch of the true honor of Hai no Kuni. You'll be a good queen someday, Azula. Naruto commented, causing Azula herself to momentarily ponder her station in how she would rule. She had always been told and brought up to believe that the reign of her father would last forever, and she herself had come to believe such terms adamantly. However, now that Naruto had been reborn into what was a new world to him, the future was uncertain. Azula shook her head in her mind, never daring to have thought such thoughts before. The very idea that her father would never rule forever was usually considered to be heresy in the eyes of her royal peers. Naruto, may I ask you a question? Mai commented, earning Naruto's half-eye gaze. What is Mai-chan? I'm open to any questions to pass the time, the sage casually responded. I know it's only been less than a day since we found you, but you seem to have quite a clear memory about your past life itself, and no skirmishes in between to interrupt your thought process. With a vibrant memory of your past, and what you could have been had you been able to stop this man called Madara, do you plan to seek and lay claim to the lands and clans you were supposed to rule over? I know it sounds like an absurd question given how many years must have passed, and such things most likely don't even exist anymore. I'd just like to know, that's all. My question calmly, Ty Lee blinking her eyes and thought about the conversation, while Azula's eyes widened at the thought of this man regaining such claim over so much territory. Even if it all was nothing but lost memories to her nation. That's an interesting question worth answering, Mai-chan. Yes, I do plan to lay claim to what was supposed to be granted to me. The lands and clans I was supposed to rule over are now long gone over course, so I will rebuild them from scratch. I suspect it'll take me little over a year to do so, given what I can accomplish in just a day. Naruto responded casually, brushing some of his golden bangs out of his eyes. Azula blinked a few times before properly accessing the situation before looking at Naruto with an adamant source of concentration. Naruto, if you actually successfully gained a foothold in so many lands and clans over such a short amount of time, you could have possibly eventually gained more power over the world in your lifetime than my great-grandfather Sozin did, and he was the greatest fire lord of all time. Azula almost immediately regretted saying such words though. It wasn't that she regretted saying such a statement to Naruto, it's that she regretted saying such a statement in general. If saying that someone could hold more power over the world than her father Ozai was heresy, then saying someone could have more grasp over the earth than Fire Lord Sozin did was practically sacrilege. Even though she had been named after her father's father, the now deceased Fire Lord Azula, she had come to know of her great-grandfather's legacy even more so than her own father's. To Azula's knowledge, Sozin was the only man she knew her father truly respected. She knew that Sozin was the father of her own father's father, but apparently that was not the only reason Ozai had respected Sozin so. Sozin was the one who saw the avatars for the threat they represented to the Fire Nation, and the world itself, sought to end the cycle of pointless altruism of helping people too weak to help themselves, which Azula herself considered a noble sentiment. The legacy of the self-proclaimed messiahs had been born with the air nomads, and more often than not the next avatar of the wretched cycle would originate from there. From the knowledge of her history told to her by her father, Sozin was one of the few beings alive to actually kill an avatar, a feat thought to be impossible due to the avatar's godlike status. The last avatar, Roku, had fallen to her great-grandfather after he had finally come to realize what chaos their order had brought upon the world. The people of this world needed to be strong for themselves. They didn't need an overhead guardian to constantly protect them when they were too feeble or lazy to do so. What she had been brought to believe was that the people of the Fire Nation, and of the rest of the world itself, needed to learn to protect themselves. They didn't need a self-proclaimed savior fighting for them. The genocide of the air nomads was supposed to have cleansed the earth of the avatar legacy forever, but Sozin had apparently believed that the next avatar, the last airbender, still lived on after the destruction brought upon his people. Sozin had continued the rest of his life as the Fire Lord, searching to locate and destroy this being, but the last avatar was never found, and Sozin's life ended in vain, as a result, never accomplishing his true mission. That's why when the new avatar had been revealed, Azula knew that her father would want to accomplish the life's work of his own father who had come so close to destroying the legacy of the avatars forever. Her failure of a brother Zuko, and the somewhat revered commander Xiao had been assigned to locate and destroy the avatar, Xiao more than her brother due to his actual order to do so. From what she suspected, Zuko only wanted to locate the avatar and destroy him in a pathetic attempt to regain honor that could never be restored. Xiao was only given the title of admiral for the planned assault on the Northern Water Tribe, but had become apparent that Ozai had begun to doubt his own decision following Xiao's numerous failures to capture or kill the avatar. Thus, why her father sent her and her friends out to assist the new admiral in his task instead. Azula, I don't mean to interrupt your train of thought, but just a moment ago you claimed that your Sosofu, your great-grandfather Fire Lord Sozin was the greatest Fire Lord of all time? Naruto questioned calmly once more, not wanting to infuriate his home with his consistent questions. Fire Lord Sozin is considered to be the greatest firebender and Fire Lord in the known history of my people. He is the man who led the Fire Nation in its campaign of unification with the 4 separate nations, and the man who sought to destroy the legacy of the Avatars forever. While it would be said to be sacrilege for even thinking such a thought, I now must wonder if my great-grandfather was truly the greatest firebender of all time to begin with. If thousands of years of my people's history have been lost to us, then it would only be natural in the mindset of the people to remember their oldest memory as the strongest. But your very existence has proven there was a time when firebenders existed far past even Sozin's time on Earth, and by that information alone any person could speculate that there might have been greater fire lords than Sozin that existed in a past that we don't even know about. Azula finished on a rather melancholic note. The thought of so many centuries of history of her people that were most likely forever lost depressed her somewhat. Naruto shrugged nonchalantly, stretching his arms from having sat in one place for so long. I wouldn't worry about the past so much, Azulaheim. I'll do my best to bring what I know and remember into this time. If I can bring knowledge that has been lost to the people of my future, then I will. After all, I vowed to protect this land thousands of years ago, and, as long as I draw breath, that vow is not broken, Naruto stated proudly, clenching a fist in determination. Azula couldn't help but to chuckle lightly at the boy's confidence, while Ty Lee and Mai smiled lightly. Ty Lee raised her hand in a childish manner to be granted an audience, something Naruto rolled his eyes humorously at. Naruto? Don't you miss the women who would have been your wives? I can't imagine the memory of losing all of them hurts any less now than it did then, Ty Lee said sadly, knowing how her friend must have felt, and most likely still felt about the loss of so many loved ones. Naruto laid back in his bed with arms resting behind his head, looking up at the ceiling in thought. To be honest, Tai-chan, I honestly didn't want to live anymore when I had lost all my friends and loved ones. But Kurama, the Kyuubi no Kitsune, wouldn't let me die so easily. He actually convinced me to live on despite the destruction of everything I cared for. I hated him for it back then, but, as everything's come full circle, I can't help but be thankful for his stubbornness. As for my loved ones, it's not like I'll never see them again. Given my power now, having them in my arms again is not an impossibility. Bringing them back will probably drain as much energy from me as it takes for me to be airborne, but I'll sacrifice all the strength I need to bring them back again. Naruto smiled brightly, fondly remembering all of the women who had dedicated themselves to him, and who he had dedicated himself to. Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee on the other hand were not as refreshed as Naruto was. Many people could interpret his recent words as borderline insanity or an escapade full of denial, but somehow each one of them felt that the golden-haired boy meant what he said in some way. In order to clear the uncomfortable air, someone had to ask him what he meant. Luckily for the trio, the boy raised his hand in order to halt the inevitable question. I know what you guys are going to say, that I can't see the ones I love ever again due to the fact they are millennials gone. However, with me there is always a way for the impossible to occur. I can breach the boundaries that the Shinigami has placed. Even he has no rule over me anymore. I can bring those who have passed to walk amongst us once more. Simply put, I can bring back people from beyond the grave. Naruto stated seriously, not an inch of humor or sarcasm present in his voice. The three were beyond perplexed at this point. Naruto had been able to display abilities not humanly possible to their knowledge, and had even talked of being able to take flight and live amongst the stars themselves, but this such a feat didn't seem possible, at least for any mortal. Are you quite serious, Naruto? You can resurrect those who have passed? How is that even possible? I'm beginning to question whether the demon you hold within you is actually real, and in fact that actually are the demon. Azula stated inquisitively, knowing full well such an accusation could cause the youth to sink Xiao's ship in anger. Instead, the boy merely shrugged once more, and got up slightly to look at his princess in her golden eyes. I can understand your discomfort or disbelief with such a feat, Azulaheim, but know full well I mean what I say, and I say what I mean. I would never lie just to disturb you. I can bring back those who have fallen, but such an ability is incredibly taxing. I can only bring back 7 to 10 people at once, then I'll collapse for a day or two out of chakra exhaustion. If I tried to bring back more than 10 people at once through the ghetto, Rinna Tensei no Jutsu, then I'd most likely face a comatose state or possibly even die if I overexerted myself. Even I'm not invincible. I can die, as anyone else can, Naruto factually retorted. We should be getting to bed soon anyway, Azulaheim. We've been up for a while, and Xiao said that it would take 2.5 days to get to the Northern Water Tribe. We should rest while we're able, and don't worry, I'll stay on my side of the room, and I'll get up when I need to use the restroom, Naruto commented in a half-joking manner, knowing full well that he could face possible castration if he tried to get grabby with his female roommates. Azula sighed in agreement, and looked at Naruto for a moment, waiting for him to exit the room. Getting the picture quickly, Naruto left the room so the girls could get dressed in their pajamas. After a moment or two of waiting, a knock on the other side of the door, as a signal, Naruto walked into the room, and saw all three females in their sleeping wear with their hair down. "Cute jammies, Tai-chan?" Naruto commented to the acrobat whose silk pink pajamas matched her ever-innocent demeanor. Ty Lee blushed a light pink at the compliment, and giggled softly, much to the amusement of Azula, as Mai merely sighed at Ty Lee's typical attitude. Naruto performed a small act with his hands, a small puff of smoke appearing around much to his roommate's surprise. Once the smoke cleared, he was decorated in a blue suit made for sleeping, to which he yawned lazily, and laid down on his bed. Ty Lee once again giggled, but this time out of actual humor at Naruto's now sleepy demeanor rather than his laid-back casual one. Mai took the left side of the bed while Ty Lee took the left, the pink acrobat snuggling comfortably into Azula's side, reminiscent of their sleepovers when they were children. Azula's lacy red nightgown that covered her body now had Ty Lee burrowing into it, to which the Fire Princess couldn't help but sigh in a desperate sort of happiness. Stroking her hand through the uppity girl's now loose hair, Azula planted a small kiss on her head, much to Ty Lee's enjoyment. Naruto sighed comfortably in his new quarters, closing his eyes, and secretly wishing Kurama a good night's sleep, as well. And then everything went black, as darkness claimed his consciousness. As the vessel moved on through the night, everyone in Azula's quarters had drifted off to sleep. The ship was kept operational through the tireless and thankless efforts of the engineers, and most of the foot soldiers themselves had gone to sleep. Guard duty wasn't off, and on premise, soldiers shared shifts to make sure that there was no danger to be had, even if they were off at sea to begin with. Xiao, however, was not asleep. The admiral had been staying up most of the night plotting the course of the battle soon to come, with the addition of Azula's company, and that of the boy, as he still thought of Naruto as. He knew there had to be a way for him to seize victory alongside the daughter of his lord. He would not be outshone by a teenager, no matter how peculiar or powerful his abilities. No, the assault would be the crowning moment in career, and it would furthermore prove to his lord that he was indeed worthy of serving the crown in future endeavors. Perhaps if the boy could be cornered, alone, where there were no witnesses to be had, he would merely be another casualty amongst the battlefield. Yes, that would work out nicely. I will not have some sun-kissed haired freak steal the glory of the Fire Nation from that battle, nor will I let him besmirch my honor or Princess Azula's. Despite Her Highness's claims, he is still a possible threat to our nation. His personality is brash and overconfident. His powers are beyond peculiar, and his origins are a mystery to me until Her Highness reveals them to me. For all we know, he could be a spy from one of the other nations sent to impede our progress from behind the scenes. Or even worse, he could be one of the Avatar's cohorts ready to strike from within. The Northern Water Tribe will fall, and the Avatar will die by my hand, and it will be done without this strange child in our midst. I see his alliance with us ending in a tragically short manner. Too bad. Such power could have been advantageous, but we do not have the slightest guarantee that he could not use such strengths against us. The following morning, the room was dreary from the dimmed lights, and there was a line of sight visible. Azula was the first to wake, Mai resting peacefully on the right, and Ty Lee passed out comfortably against her own side. Despite the lack of light, she could see that Naruto's bed was empty. Moving up slightly, as Ty Lee's arms fell from place, the princess moved off her bed softly so as to not disturb companions, only for Ty Lee to moan like a child whose parent had left it in bed unattended. Ty Lee rose with a rather noisy yawn, which in turn stirred Mai from her slumber, as she shook her hair out of her face. Ty Lee scratched her bum lazily, yawning once more in a lazy fashion, only for her echoing moan to be cut short by a pillow playfully tossed in her direction by Mai, much to Azula's amusement. "I need a shower," Mai proclaimed out loud, getting off from her bed and turning the lights on. As she fumbled in the darkness, she and her acrobatic friend were quick to notice Naruto's absence, to which they looked at Azula in question. The Fire Princess merely shrugged in response, heading towards the royal showers to wake herself up, and then look for Naruto after. She knew he had to still be on the ship. He wouldn't just get up and leave, or rather fly away for no reason. Mai and Ty Lee were quick to join Azula in a respective shower, each washing down their naked bodies from the morning grime that followed any normal person. The nudity in which they shared each other's presences, while alarming or unusual to most people, was not exactly uncommon for them. They had all seen each other naked before, usually after changing after a swim, or having to share a shower when there were no others available. Mai was the least comfortable among them, however. Though what they were doing was strictly platonic, the thought of showering bare amongst her friends was still a little off-putting to her. Her friends didn't seem the least bit bothered though Mai herself thought they weren't as reserved as she was, due to the fact that the princess and the acrobat had always been very close to one another, even, as far as friends go. Azula and Ty Lee took turns washing each other's backs, with Ty Lee occasionally stopping to feel the muscles of her princess, much to Azula's amusement and/or pleasure. There was no physical evidence to prove that the relationship between Azula and Ty Lee was in any way physical or intimate, despite her slight suspicions that behind closed doors the two were as close with one another as the bond between a man and a woman. Homosexuality wasn't exactly uncommon or unheard of, even though it was mostly frowned upon by nobility and families who wanted their son and/or daughter to continue their family line regardless if it was of noble stature or not. She had remembered that during her time in court there seemed to be two females who always seemed to be at each other's side, without having the fear of being judged. Whether or not they were actually intimate, Mai simply didn't care about sexual preference. If two people loved each other regardless of gender, which was their business, not hers. A sharp snap from a towel against her backside made the reserved girl jump and let out a high-pitched yip, the naked acrobat laughing without shame of her antics as the fire princess chuckled slightly on the side. Her eye twitching in annoyance, Mai grabbed her towel and began to snap it at Ty Lee's sides, causing the uppity girl to shriek herself. After a minute or two of play fighting for the hell of it, the trio of women dried themselves off and equipped themselves with their garments, and then began to wander the hallways to stretch their legs and look for Naruto. As the trio walked down the hallway, they were soon entranced by an enticing smell. A faint smile crossed their lips, each one equally enthralled by a rather unique scent in the air. Whatever was causing it, it certainly smelled delectable. A far cry from the food served to the common foot soldiers. The smell enticed them to the place of its origins, the dining hall. Whether or not this was mere trickery of the aroma of a food that was actually awful was yet to be seen. As Azula and her companions made their way into the rather large dining room filled with hungry soldiers, a familiar visage captured their eyes. At the usual spot where a cook would be placed, in his place stood Naruto, a bright smile washing over his face as he stirred the pot that the aroma had originated from. Like a flock of moths drawn to a lantern, the three women walked casually over to their golden-haired friend to see what exactly he had been up to. Naruto's head perked up upon hearing footsteps approaching his general direction, and was glad to see that his three friends had woken up. "Ah, good morning, ladies. I knew you'd find me eventually. I woke up about an hour ago. I got bored, so I took a shower and followed the scent of food due to my rumbling stomach. Needless to say, though, the food I found wasn't exactly appetizing, and reminded me a fair bit too much of the rations we shinobi got served during our times at war. So I decided to cook up a bit of food myself." Naruto grinned, already having had his full hand-cooked meal. Ty Lee looked down at the boiling pot, and took a deep whiff of it, and sighed in contentment upon smelling the aroma up close. "It smells awesome, Naruto. Where did you learn to cook?" Ty Lee asked. "When you're one of the last people on Earth, you've got to learn to feed yourself, Tai-chan. Luckily for me, the places where I traveled had plenty of cookbooks and recipes to be had I could learn from. And since I've traveled practically everywhere in this country, I'd look to toot my own horn and say that I think I know nearly every recipe in the book for authentic Hi-no-Kuni food, and that's saying a lot at the moment considering the recipes from my time probably don't even exist in this time." Naruto smiled, still enjoying the sweet aftertaste of chicken in his mouth. "I managed to gather what ingredients I could with the chef's permission. When he saw me, I guess he took it upon himself not to question what I'd do to the fact I travel with the princess of the Fire Nation herself. As for the rest, luckily I still had a few scrolls on me that I used to store some of the best ingredients from my time, and they haven't aged a day. I can tell you that much," the blonde said, as he laughed heartily. Mai couldn't help but be inquisitive now, her stomach more than envious of some decent food since her departure from her estate, the only good thing about it being the royal delicacies. "What exactly have you made, Naruto? If you would let us, I'd like to try some," Mai inquired curiously, a small smile tracing across the sage's lips. "It's called miso soup, Mai-chan. It's a common meal to be had in the time I lived, but I suspected it wasn't so common in this time, so I decided to make some up to liven the place up a bit. The recipe usually consists of 2 teaspoons of dashi granules, 4 cups of water, 3 tablespoons of miso paste, 8 ounces of diced silken tofu, and 2 cut-up green onions, but fortunately for me I had larger table to serve, so I made a lot more than I usually would. When I started cooking, it attracted the noses of several of your hungry foot soldiers, who I suspect hadn't had their full of proper nutrition or were just literally sick of eating their current rations. So I grabbed the biggest pots I could find, and started whipping up as much of the stuff as I could, and I think I've put a smile on their faces with my food, I can tell you that much," Naruto stated with a wide grin of his own at a job well done, as Azula took note of at least 23 soldiers eagerly enjoying their meals. She had never seen the men eat before with such passion. It was almost a little unnerving given the solemn state of their usual appetites. They were talking to each other rather casually, as they chatted back and forth about how today's cook, Azula's guest of honor himself, had been a great customary improvement of their rations, and stale recipes. As they noticed the princess's gaze watching, they quieted down a bit out of nervousness, something Ty Lee couldn't help but chuckle at. Azula turned to face them with a demanding sort of look, a small smirk present on her face. "Men, I'd like your attention please. The guest of this vessel, and my new companion, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, has given this deck the unexpected honor of having a new cook with even newer meals to be had." In a moment of clarity and respect for what he had done, "I'd like you to voice your opinions on his dish. I expect nothing but complete honesty. Usually this is not how I operate, this I can acknowledge, but I truly would like to know how this tastes to you fine soldiers," Azula loudly stated, making sure all the soldiers could hear her and take immediate note of her demand. After a moment or two of silence, one nervous soldier stood with a mug in his hand, raising it towards the ceiling. "Your Highness Princess Azula, if I may speak freely, as you have asked us to, this is some of the best food I've tasted in my line of duty." The soldier stuttered, afraid that anything he said the princess would punish him for. Another soldier stood up almost immediately after he finished his sentence, seeking to defend his ally from possible retribution. "It's not our usual chef's fault though, given that more than half of the food he has to serve just comes from modifying our rations with a few spices that hardly make a difference in taste. The man you've brought on this vessel, Princess Azula, is a fine cook, and he came with his own products to make us this rewarding meal. If only we could get stuff like this more often," another man remarked. "That would make serving in this navy a whole lot easier," said another armored subordinate. Azula crossed her arms slightly for the men to get the gist to silence themselves, which they did, and quickly went back to eating to not entice any possible wrath from their princess. "Well, Naruto, clearly many of the men on this ship are in your favor. What else did you add into this winter soup of yours?" Azula asked in a half-joking manner. Naruto chuckled lightly, entertained with the fact that so many had begun to inquire about the contents of his meal. "Well, I added some herbs and spices I collected from my time in Nano Kuni, the land of vegetables, which contains some of the finest ingredients in the entire world in my time. I added some parsley, a small hint of lemon, and 2 small peppers for spice. I wasn't quite sure how the crew would react to it, but I'm glad a lot of them seemed to enjoy it. You may have as much as you wish, my ladies. I originally made this to be your breakfast to begin with. I just got carried away when so many hungry faces showed up." Naruto blushed slightly, rubbing the back of his head that cooking had become a slight passion of his when he had wandered the earth in search of purpose. "Ah, that's so sweet of you, Naruto. Thanks for thinking of us," Ty Lee commented, grabbing a nearby bowl and serving herself up some soup. Azula and Mai soon followed, with the 3 bringing their respective meals to a nearby vacant table. As they all began to ingest the sage-made soup, needless to say all enjoyed their meals to a great degree. Upon the first spoonful, Ty Lee let out a small but noticeable squeal of euphoria, something Azula and Mai had taken note of and chuckled over, with the golden-haired chef watching in amusement. Mai blushed slightly upon tasting the food, seeing why it had brought so much apparent joy to her acrobatic friend. Azula herself also noted the richness of the taste. If this was a common meal from Naruto's time that he could make so well, she dared to think of what would happen if it was made an actual delicacy from the Fire Nation's past. Azula and Mai both had 2 bowls to not try to appear gluttonous or overbearing in front of their new ally and friend. Ty Lee, however, was not as modest and had 4.5 bowls out of sheer want for the soup, to which Naruto laughed at, and said that the more the person consumed from his time when a meal was offered to them was an act that honored the chef himself. After their bowls were emptied, they passed them to Naruto, who was already cleaning the dishes left behind from several hungry soldiers that had already partaken in eating earlier. As the 3 waded back to their rooms, they discussed with one another the contents of their meal, and how Naruto seemed to be a genuine cook on top of things he already proved he could do. Ty Lee sighed happily once she hit her bed. As the trio reached their quarters, her stomach filled constantly with miso soup. It wasn't more than 20 minutes later that Naruto returned, stretching his arms from having scrubbed at least 3 dozen bowls clean of miso grime. He sat down on his bed comfortably, and laid back for a moment to catch up on his thoughts. He wouldn't have time to rest long then, a certain pink-clad girl hovering over him, as his one good eye widened in a bit of surprise. "Yes, Tai-chan? Is there something else I can do for you?" Naruto asked, as the pink girl just looked over at him with a wide grin on his face. "Nope, just looking at you, that's all. I like your eyes." "I meant eyes. Your blue has a slit in it like a cat, and your pale green one is pretty in its own way," Ty Lee said, as she tripped over her own sentences, not wanting to offend the half-blind man. Naruto chuckled softly, as Mai and Azula couldn't help but shake their heads at Ty Lee's clumsy demeanor, knowing full well that such a compliment could be taken as a slight insult in direction to Naruto's distorted eye. "Relax, Tai-chan. No need to tiptoe through the tulips. As I said before, I came to terms with my half-blindness a long time ago. You don't need to apologize when you've done nothing wrong. Comments about it don't actually bother me. And for the record, I like your eyes too. They always have a really pretty, bouncy look to them. They reflect your personality well, Naruto commented casually, as he started to perform leg squats from his sitting position, earning a slight blush at Ty Lee from the accidental comment. The trio remained silent for a while, an occasional chatter rising from the boredom, and silence every 10 minutes or so. Ty Lee seemed to have the venture to the bathroom every 20 minutes to relieve herself, something Naruto half-jokingly commented on to Azula, and my that such a large consumption of miso soup would build up in a person's bladder quickly. A few more hours passed in which the group did roughly as much as they could to pass the time. Naruto engaged in a few rounds of chess with Mai, to which the score ended 1-2 with Mai as the victor, with the blonde claiming a few thousand years of being in prison most likely made him rusty. The sage also had meditated with Ty Lee in his spare time, with Naruto a bit perplexed at how flexible the acrobat's body was, in which the uppity female would tell the boy tales of her time at the circus, to which the blonde responded that it sounded awesome. Azula also asked Naruto for a moment of his time after he was done spending time with her friends, to which he was more than happy to grant the audience for. The two talked of the upcoming battle, and what would occur after it. In Azula's mind, if the battle was a success, to which she had the absolute determination that no other outcome would be acceptable, that after the victory Naruto should return with her following the Avatar's demise to personally meet her father the Fire Lord Ozai to discuss future service to the Fire Nation. Naruto agreed wholeheartedly, claiming that his absence from his homeland was a time far too long, and he merely wished to protect his home which he failed to in the past, something the Fire Princess admired his patriotism for. Another hour or so passed that accompanied a grand amount of heavy sighs that were evidently out of boredom, mainly from Ty Lee, and Naruto with the desire to move and see things. Eventually, the blonde jumped off his bed, dusted himself off, and looked at his princess with determination in his eyes. Azulaheim, if I may be so bold, I think I've spent all the time I can sitting still for a while. Between spending time with all of you, there really isn't much to do, as we wait for the raid on the Northern Water Tribe to commence, Naruto commented casually, earning a nod in agreement from the Fire Princess. While it is most regrettable that there is little else to do in our time aboard this vessel other than wait for what is to come, I'm afraid we cannot actually do much else until that point. Unless you had a better idea, which I take it you do? Azula practically smirked, earning a soft chuckle from the golden-haired man in response. Strange, we've been together for such a short amount of time, and already you can read me like a book. You're a sharp one, Azulaheim. What I was planning was to teleport from this ship to the Northern Water Tribe itself. We're quite a distance away from it, I know, but I should be able to land in a close vicinity to its actual location given that I only have to travel in one general direction to get there, Naruto commented, to which Mai and Ty Lee both raised their eyebrows. What do you plan to do while you're there? You may be powerful, but I don't know if you can take on a whole tribe of elite waterbenders by yourself, Mai said nonchalantly. Mai's right, Naruto. Plus, not to offend you or anything, but your appearance is one that kind of draws attention. You don't exactly look like a common visitor, Ty Lee added in, to which the blonde smirked at the statement in response. Why thank you, Ty Lee. I didn't know that my physical appearance drew so much attention. Have you been watching me while I haven't been looking? Naruto half-jokingly replied, which in turn caused the acrobat to blush a light pink, much to Azula's amusement, and Mai's usual eye-rolling. While you do make an excellent point, Tai-chan, I didn't exactly say that I'd be visiting as an enemy, did I? My alias will be that of a foreigner, which they'll be inclined to believe due to my looks in comparison to their own people. My story will be that I had heard tales of the Avatar's return, and had gotten wind where he was heading next, so I followed his route to have the honor to meet him. I won't cause any trouble while I'm at the tribe, however. It is unlikely they even know of our homeland's plan of attack, and I'm sure you'd like to keep it that way, Azulaheim. My name while I'm there will be the same as when I'm in your company, Azulaheim. I have no reason to hide my semblance of self, only my intentions, and who I serve shall remain hidden. Think of this as not only a reconnaissance mission to see if they are aware of our impending arrival, but a way for me to pass the time in relation to our assault. I will also see how many children, sick, and elderly are present at this encampment. If I am to serve my homeland once again, we should retain the honor we held once in the past. We do not kill those who cannot fight against us. Naruto finished in a determined tone, while Azula raised an eyebrow in surprise at one of his following statements. While this sounds like a worthwhile endeavor that I can approve of, Naruto, I'm surprised that you'd limit your opponents with such sympathy in mind. I was always taught whoever is in the line of fire during war is fair game. Apparently that is not so in your own mind. Azula replied rather coldly, earning an even colder stare from Naruto in response. Azulaheim, while I respect, as the princess of my homeland, and a newfound ally, and friend of mine, please know that the way I was introduced to war is apparently different from the wisdom your father or studies has placed upon you. I know that not everyone can be saved in war, That is an inevitability. Please know that I will at least try to save those who pose no threat to us. In truth, while I can take life rather easily through my power, I do not relish in the ability to do so. There is usually little honor to be had in bloodshed, unless the person killed truly needed to be stopped, and there was no other safe alternative but to kill him or her. I appeal to you though that whatever I find out in the Northern Water Tribe, it will not affect my loyalties to you or our homeland. While I can see the benefits in such a militaristic way of thinking, I can say without any hesitation that the cons far outweigh the pros. I know that your father, the fire daimyo of this, wishes to unite the four nations, and that within itself is an admirable goal. But some steps need to be taken in between so we do not stray from the honor of our nation itself. While I can recognize many will die in this battle, perhaps more than I wish to save, we should still look at all the alternatives possible. At the end of this war, we should have the populace remember the people of Hai no Kuni as honorable warriors, not tyrants or murderers. Naruto finished with an indomitable tone in his voice, as Azula's stare at him changed from a small glare to eyes slightly widened at the tone of which her new friend was addressing her. He had pledged himself to her service, yet he was not afraid to voice his opinion, but he did so in a way that showed respect and little impudence towards her station, which was in itself a rarity. Seeing as so many were willing to kowtow to her with little of their own actual personality still evident. Mai and Tai Li were slightly afraid that Naruto's manner would still come off as too challenging or possibly as insulting to their royal friend. Either one of them wished to see such a promising ally who had become a reasonable companion thrown into the waters for insubordination. Very well, Naruto. I admire that you feel you speak your mind so freely, yet you still seek to respect me at the same time. Report to me with what you find at the Northern Water Tribe, and I will make sure to inform Xiao of which areas our navy is not to target due to civilian populations. Azula replied casually, shocking both of her female friends in the process. Naruto smiled sincerely while bowing to her out of respect, shortly afterwards taking off his headband that bore a symbol of his language upon it, putting it softly in the hands of his princess, whose golden eyes looked up to meet azure and viridian. Keep this until I return Azulaheim. Think of it as a promise that I'll come back safely without question. After this battle is over, would you like to spar with me? Fire bending only? Even though you're my princess, you're still my friend. A round or two with you would probably be a pretty good fight, Naruto said while a small smile passed his lips, to which Azula couldn't help but look up at him with a smirk of her own. If you think you can win, that is, Azula responded in a slightly combative manner, where Naruto couldn't help but chuckle slightly. I'm sure you'll be quite the challenge, Azulaheim. I'll be gone for about 3 days or so, but I'll be back safely, so don't worry, the sage stated, walking over to his bed and pulling out a mask from one of his duffel bags used to contain personal items. It bore a shade of a silver opaque, with 3 small slits at the bottom of it so he could not only breathe, but for others to see a small image of his lips. The shapes used to form my holes were slanted ever so slightly, putting off a slight intimidating visage to the azure and viridian circles behind them. Ja-eni, Azulaheim. And in an instant, the boy vanished into a swirling formation, the same technique he had used to transport them out of the ruins and have them arrive at the navy in only a few seconds flat. Azula sighed slightly at the disappearance of her newfound companion, and tied the headband he had given her around her arm, as a reminder that he would return. I'm surprised you listened to his plea about the civilian populace, Azula. Usually if someone questioned a military raid on an operation like this, it doesn't exactly suit well with royalty. Mai commented softly, knowing full well that the wrath of anger noble, especially that of one who knew firebending, could, and usually would take its toll on the one who questioned them. She had known that her distant crush Zuko, Azula's own older brother, had once commented on a plan of attack similar to what Naruto himself had questioned, only to end up with one side of his face scarred for life by his own father for his supposed impudence. While your statement rings true in regards to my family, and I would usually not tolerate questioning regarding hesitance in a military operation, we must remember that Naruto has proven himself a worthy ally, an even greater warrior. As both you are aware, Naruto most likely has secrets of his own that can highly benefit the Fire Nation in destroying the legacy of the Avatar, uniting the 4 nations, and helping us gain even more influence than we have already. I will not destroy such an opportunity when it is presented to me just because he stated his opinion. Regardless of what anyone has to say to my supposed leniency, Naruto has so far proven himself an ally and a friend to the 3 of us, and more importantly, our homeland itself, Azula stated in a matter-of-fact voice, earning a small grin from Tai Li, who soon hovered over her friend with a certain aspect of mischief present in the air. Azula narrowed her eyes in slight annoyance, knowing full well Tai Li was most likely going to give her own output of the situation. Maybe you're being more lenient to him more than other people because you like him, Tai Li teased childishly, putting a severe amount of emphasis on the word like, to which Azula rolled her eyes slightly in response while fighting back a very small blush. Please, It's been less than a day since we've met Naruto. It would hardly be logical to grow feelings for a man in such a short amount of time. Such relationships are only the aspect of fairy tales, Ty Lee. As I've stated before, I find his command of such unknown abilities intriguing, and I've already made it perfectly clear that his knowledge will help bring the war to end much quicker than we could have predicted, and hopefully unite the 4 nations while our own homeland grows in power like we could have only dreamed. Azula retorted, huffing slightly to deter her acrobatic friend's pursuit of slowly depriving her patience. So you find his abilities intriguing, eh? Or rather, do you mean, you find him intriguing? Ty Lee giggled, to which my face palmed at Ty Lee's childish antics. Why must you consistently turn every word of mine into some perverse manner that implies an attraction towards Naruto? It's become increasingly obvious to nearly everyone in the vicinity that you yourself bear some kind of attraction towards Naruto's physical state, and perhaps even a truer interest in his actual semblance of being rather than just a fling. Azula said in hopes of turning the situation on Ty Lee to halt her friend's antics. Ty Lee just smiled and entered a playful meditation pose, still having her chocolate eyes concentrate on Azula. While I will admit that Naruto is a bit of a looker, and a pretty nice guy who's quite capable of many things in his own right, I wouldn't say I like him so far. As you said, it's been less than a day since we've met him. I'd have to get to know him a lot more before I come to the conclusion that I actually have feelings for him. For the moment, if anything, I find to be a very interesting person. I've never seen people do what he's capable of, and his personality is something of a mystery, which is always fun to unravel. Ty Lee responded playfully. While I'll agree with you that he is indeed a very interesting person, how come when I give Naruto a bit of leniency you imply that such actions are done out of an attraction I have for him, while you've been more up in his face more than the 3 of us in the short time we've been together? Wouldn't that imply that you're the one who likes him, not me? I'm afraid your little fantasy scenario has a few plot holes in it, Ty Lee, Azula said while chuckling slightly, still failing to deter the goofy smile from her friend's face. I've already stated the reasons why I don't like Naruto yet, if I ever come to that, which I personally feel may be a possibility in the future once I get to know him more. And to justify the supposed hypocrisy of the attraction between Naruto, you, and I, it's because I like to see you get flustered. It's just so unlike you. That's why it's so funny. Ty Lee giggled while letting out a small snort, a small vein throbbing in Azula's head out of frustration. Mai couldn't help but shake her head, constantly being reminded of the similar circumstances of their childhood where Ty Lee was often the comic foil to Azula's rather cold demeanor. I hope you have fun out there, Naruto. It'll probably be much more entertaining than watching Azula strangle Ty Lee for the umpteenth time. The dark girl thought drearily, as she herself started to drift off out of boredom. Meanwhile, in the middle of the ocean, Naruto kicked his legs to maintain the balance needed to stay afloat in the freezing waters, which in terms to him weren't all that freezing due to the fact he could use the Kyuubi's chakra to keep him as warm as he would be in a sauna, as he was in the water. God damn it, I think I undershot that teleportation sequence. The Jakuken Ito always was a bitch to master, still haven't gotten used to it. I honestly don't know how Madara managed to get it down. Maybe I should ask him. Oh right, he's dead. Chuckles. Hey Kurama, do you sense any good levels of chakra or chi nearby? If so, that's probably where the Northern Water Tribe encampment is located. I could home in on that with another Jakuken Ito use, but that might cause suspicion if I just appear right the hell out of nowhere in their home. Not only that, but it's not like that jutsu has a low casting chakra maneuver. Even with all the energy I have, it can be a bitch to pull off with repeated use. Hey Kit, once you stop thinking to yourself, I've got some news for you. I'm pretty damn sure I managed to locate the chi signatures of the Waterbender tribe. It's the only thing I'm able to pick up for miles from where we are. Other than the occasional seal, that is, of course. Well, that's good to hear, thanks Kurama. How far are they from where we are now? I'd say about roughly a mile, Kit. If you don't want to poof out of nowhere like that flashy Sasuke did during your Chunin exams, I'd suggest paddling like a motherfucker in order to get there fast. I know my chakra can keep us both superheated like this water is nothing, but I really don't like to stay wet for too long. Why's that? Do you hate the water or something? I wouldn't say I hate it. I just grew an aversion to it, that's all. It reminds me way too much when I spent 3 weeks in Kirigakure terrorizing the populace with Isabu. Not that crushing you humans beneath my paws ever gets dull, but the feeling of constantly being wet grows rather tiresome. I honestly don't understand how that stupid turtle can take it. At the end of the 7th day, I didn't feel dry for a month. Touching. I know, right? So what's the plan when we get to this place anyway? Please tell me we get to fuck up their shit. Didn't you hear me tell Azula that this is a reconnaissance mission? I was hoping you were joking. The little skirmish we had with those earthbenders, while a bit bloody, wasn't exactly enough to satiate my appetite for violence. It's been far too long since we went on a killing spree. You're incorrigible. I know, but I'm the fucking Kyuubi. What do I care what you think? Can we at least show off for these people a bit? Blow their minds with what we're capable of. Maybe show them it doesn't take a supposed messiah to bend 4 elements at a whim? We don't want them getting too suspicious of our nature, but blowing people's minds in this time is the best part of getting to live again. Their faces will never stop being priceless when they see our strength. True, I'm sure I'll blow their minds more than once while I'm there anyway. I don't even think I'll have to try really hard anyway, given the limited understanding of elements and non-existent knowledge of jutsu. Sweet. Watching these mortals soil their trousers never gets old, though it sure did leave a bad taste in my mouth when I devoured countless amounts of them. That's fucking disgusting, Kurama. Why do you have to joke so lightheartedly about slaughtering literally thousands of my people, even if such events happened millennia ago? Because it's fun to butcher someone when they're most afraid of you? I really will never understand why you get off on killing. One of the many mysteries of life. Kit now starts swimming like Hoshigaki used to. Roger that, Captain Asshole. Full speed ahead. Approximately 20 minutes of swimming later. In comparison to the Southern Water Tribe, their northern counterparts seemed much grander in comparison to their own home. The entire encampment was like a fortress made of ice instead of just a few flimsy igloos out in the middle of nowhere, which was Sokka's comparison to what the villages looked like side by side. There was a noticeable change in the very presence of the northern tribe, however. It seemed not only much bigger, but much more war-ready and noble in comparison to the meager defense and peasant life of their counterparts on the other side of the world. Upon their arrival, in which they were welcomed with open arms, Sokka was quick to note the presence of a silver-haired beauty, whose azure eyes looked even more tranquil than the water itself. Katara was needless to say amused that her brother was smitten with a member of the Northern Water Tribe upon their first 10 minutes in the vicinity, and to her it was even more entertaining that the aforementioned woman was Princess Yu, who would most likely be leading her tribe in the future after the war with the Fire Nation had ended. Aang and his friends were welcomed personally into the Northern Water Tribe by Chieftain Arnuk, the leader of the tribe, and the father of Princess Yu herself. The Avatar's arrival had been expected and welcomed, unlike many other places in the gang's previous travels where the Avatar was seen only as a coward who abandoned the world out of fear 100 years ago. While this had often been seen as Fire Nation propaganda, many people had truly come to think in such a way, something that saddened and disheartened Aang deeply. 2 guards stationed near the entrance who had been left to look after Aang's flying bison apple were ready for just about anything at this point. If a visit from the supposedly long-gone Messiah had occurred, they were prepared for just about anything, or so they thought. One of the 2 men squinted his eyes upon the belief that he had seen something, to which the other man would look in said general direction to see a geyser of water rushing towards the docks. They both entered their respective fighting stances, whether or not this was some kind of new underwater assault tactic from the Fire Nation, or even a rampaging serpent. They would stand to fight no matter the cost to their own lives. As the incoming object neared within 20 feet of the docks, the water exploded, as a figure front flipped high in the air 3 times, landing right in front of them in the process. Naruto stood amongst the frightened men with a mischievous smile adorning his face underneath his mask. Before introducing himself, he shook his incredibly long golden hair from side to side like a wet dog, sending a mini shower onto the 2 poor guards before him. After brushing themselves rather angrily and re-entering their fighting poses, the man on the right decided it was time to address the would-be assailant. You, identify yourself. Who are you? And what business do you have here in the Northern Water Tribe? We would also like to know where you come from, lest you be a Fire Nation spy. Naruto rolled his eyes casually and coughed a bit before deciding to make his situation perfectly clear. It's a pleasure to meet you both, gentlemen. I am Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto, and I hail from the Earth Kingdom. I have traveled long and far as a wandering warrior, and then I had learned of rumors that the Avatar himself had returned to bring prosperity to this world once again. The tales have brought me here, as were the rumors that this would be where the Avatar would visit next. If he is here, it would give me great honor to meet him, Naruto said with a smirk behind his mask. All he needed to do was sugar these people up in order to get them to believe him. Perhaps all the time amongst shinobi had given him the useful skill of lying with a straight face, something he was not necessarily proud of, but glad to have nonetheless. While your words seem to have no ill intent, how can we know you're telling the truth? You could be an undercover Fire Nation spy here to try to assassinate the Avatar, kill our chief Arnuk, or even assassinate Her Highness Princess Yu. Not only that, but the manner in which you introduce yourself is most peculiar. You burst out of freezing water swimming at speeds unimaginable for a human, and your attire, as well as your hair, do not reassemble any men or women anyone has ever seen in this truth before. In my entire life I have never once seen a person with sun-kissed hair like yourself, which at least bodes true in your claim that you are a foreigner, the guard on the left said. Would you believe that I swam all the way here? And, as for my appearance, as I said, I'm obviously not from around here. You said you haven't seen anyone with blonde hair in all your life, and I'm guessing that means you've never left this place, which means you wouldn't know if someone was capable of having this kind of hair or not. Though I must say, I haven't seen many people with my colored hair myself. I guess I'm a bit of a rarity, Naruto casually retorted, earning a small snort from one of the guards. While I can't say much about my defensive claims about people with your unusual hair color, it must be said that it would not be humanly possible for anyone, man or woman, to swim all the way here. The way here is an ocean miles upon miles long, with the water only getting colder with each passing yard. You would have either drowned out of exhaustion or frozen to death if you truly did make it into the regionally cold waters, the guard on the right stated. Naruto shrugged nonchalantly in response, stretching out his arms and legs in an attempt to get used to the frigid air. I'll admit it wasn't really fun paddling through miles and miles of ocean to get here, but I did what I had to. I actually did come close to passing out once or twice, but I remembered that the avatar would most likely be here, and that kept me going. The reason I can swim so fast is because I grew up in a small town called Baroshi that overlooked a calm river. We often had to physically swim in order to get from one area of our town to the next due to the lack of sturdy bridges, and not enough boats to supply everyone with. Naruto lied, as his true face under his mask remained that of stone. No physical signs would be evident if he was lying even without something covering his face. The guards looked at one another in a moment of consideration, and both nodded to another in agreement. We'll bring it to the dining hall where Chief Arnuk will be the one to judge if you're trustworthy or not. If you are not what you claim, keep in mind this entire tribe is full of elite warriors and waterbending masters that are more than enough to stop a rowdy foreigner, spoke the guard on the left, as his partner and Naruto respectively began walking down the icy sidewalk towards their destination. Naruto couldn't help but smile underneath his mask about how easy it was to infiltrate this village. It was almost too easy in his own mind to be going off without a hitch. He half expected several shinobi hidden in the shadows to launch an ambush at any moment, but then he remembered that this wasn't the age of shinobi anymore, but the age of benders. The sage smirked as he saw the faces of those he passed. Several men, women, and children looked at him like he was some type of strange creature. The guards spoke at least some truth about his matter of appearance, which was most peculiar in today's standards in regards to what normal people look like, something Azula and many others had made evidently clear to him many times before. The dark-skinned men and women who he passed looked upon his garments, and most likely his hair, in both suspicion and awe. While the arrival of the Avatar had been expected and welcomed, this new visitor was a mystery and a possible foe. Seeing the color of their skin amongst the populace, Naruto thought of a link to their ancestry to be Kumogakure due to the darker pigmentation of flesh. He quickly dismissed this theory, however, considering how Kumo was the land of lightning, and these people mainly controlled bodies of water, something that more often was to be related to the nine of Nami no Kuni, but the land of waves bore no icebergs or frigid temperatures like this land did. Naruto had often heard of smaller villages that bordered near the north and south poles that he never had the chance to visit in his past life, so it was most likely that these tribes were descendants of them. The blonde remembered that such groups of people, while mainly separated from the events of the world itself, were often called Inuit or Eskimos by the people of his past. Perhaps the same terms existed in this new world, but he decided not to test such a theory out of fear of being waterbend a new rump. As the trio of men entered the royal dining hall, the guards stood in awed silence, as they bore witness to a marvelous spectacle before them. A ceremony to welcome the long-awaited Avatar was currently being performed. An elderly man with silvery white hair led his friends in a spectacular display of elite waterbending prowess. The aged warrior was recognized by every man, woman, and child of the Northern Water Tribe as Master Paku, the greatest waterbender of their tribe, and close friend, as well as advisor to their own chieftain, Arnuk. Naruto's eye followed the rhythm and complexity of the waterbending before him, to which he himself would admit that there was no doubt the group performing such arts were all equally talented warriors. Such a natural command of chi over water without the use of jutsu was usually rare even in his own time, but it wasn't an impossible feat to be sure. A high-level jonin, or an experienced A&B op who had been trained in water release styles could most likely perform what he was seeing now. It didn't take long for the young sage to deduct who was most experienced in the group. Naruto knew it had to be the eldest out of them all. He had a stern look on his face that demanded respect and commanded a great deal of power. As he stared at the elderly man from afar, he was at first reminded of his own dearly departed sensei Jiraiya, but was quick to note that the aura of this man seemed different than that of his old master. It was rougher, more rugged, and most likely less friendly or as casual as what Jiraiya had been. The only advantage he could think of was that the old man before him most likely did not have the Erosanin's perverse nature as a part of his own personality. As he and the guards walked forward closer to the ceremony where they could be seen, several heads turned to look at them only for many eyes to be drawn to Naruto out of almost immediate curiosity. Two girls who were currently seated caught Naruto's attention slightly, as his one good eye drifted from watching the waterbending underneath his mask to watch them through his peripheral vision. They were both dark-skinned, as he had come to expect, but the main difference lay within their physical features. One was dressed in an urban-style blue dress befitting a peasant, with her hair put into little loops which he found oddly attractive. Another similarity between the two was that they both had soft, but firm blue eyes, but understandably they lacked the animalistic slit that was present in his retina. The other girl dressed in a much more royal style of clothing that was easily discernible from the aforementioned girls, but an oddity about this one was that her hair was not even remotely close to the black or dark brown colors of her fellow villagers, but it was a reflection of the moon itself, a silvery beautiful white. Naruto noted this as particularly odd in his own mind, not just due to the fact that her hair was so much different than the others around her, but because of her age that she bore such an opaque feature. Most people he had seen in his own time that had apparently not changed from what was currently the present was that usually only elderly people possessed silver white hair, fondly remembering his Jiraiya-sensei as the best example. In his own time there were sometimes people of a younger age that bore a sort of silver white hair, but such people were rarities within themselves. There was the passionate swordsman who had once allied with Sasuke, Hozuki Suigetsu, and then there was one of the Sound Four who had a sort of grayish-white hair, Kimimaro. Naruto remembered that his own Kakashi had a darker shade of silver hair, which a member of Akatsuki, Haiden, had in common with the Sharingan warrior. But the most likely noble girl to the side of him bore the whitest hair he had ever seen in his entire life, an even clearer white than Jiraiya's. It had become apparent that the combined girls staring had attracted the attention of others next to them who were seated, as well, most notably a male water tribe teen, and a bald boy dressed in what appeared to be robes suitable for a monk. The boy who sat next to the girl with hair loopies had a noticeable portion of his own hair tied up in a bun in relation to keeping a warrior-like look. He dressed in the same manner to the similar-looking female next to him. A much more peasant look adorned his clothes, a small boomerang, and club tied his waist. As Naruto had come to expect thus far, this boy seemed to be eyeing him with skepticism and suspicion, as other villagers he had passed had done, but he shrugged it off to get a better look at the balding male whose eyes were also studying him. The noticeably younger male was dressed in robes similar to what Naruto himself had to adorn in reference towards his time studying the sage arts on Mount Myoboku. The cloth reflected a certain art of both tranquility and balance, imitating the robes that traveling monks would wear in the shinobi age, as they embarked on their journeys to achieve nirvana. A peculiar-looking staff was draped around his back, but even stranger were the noticeable markings that bore themselves on the youth's forehead and fists. All three of them looked similar to arrows pointing in their respective directions. I don't think it takes a genius to find out that that's probably the Avatar kid. He stands out amongst these people like a sore thumb, almost as much as we do. Gotta agree with you there, Kurama. You think we should have enabled a genjutsu that makes us look a bit more normal in comparison with these people? We're already gonna have to tell them one hell of a fib. Not that that'll be of any consequence or difficulty, mind you. Nah, we shouldn't have to cloak ourselves for stuff like this. Even if it is a reconnaissance mission, better to have the people of this world see us for who we are than hide in the shadows during your days as an een. Besides, just like when we show off what we can do, it's always funny to see people react to our actual physical appearance, given how strange we look to them. Any thoughts on the Avatar so far, Kurama? Sense anything unusual? Are you kidding, kid? Look at this guy. He's a fucking toddler to old-timers like you and I. This is the guy who's supposed to be the self-proclaimed messiah to save the world from the tyranny of our homeland. This is a joke without a punchline, kid. What's to say we just flatten the little twerp right now and save Azula the trouble? No, this is a reconnaissance mission, Kurama. Reconnaissance. I'm supposed to spy on these people, not murder them. We talked about this already, remember? I was hoping I could change your mind. And what was that about calling us old-timers? I thought you'd never admit to being old, Fox. You know damn well I could be your 50 times great-grandpa before you were even 10 years old. How do you think I feel about reawakening from at least a 5,000-year coma into a world where jutsu and ninja are practically non-existent? It won't be fun to slaughter people anymore if they can't even put up a good fight. It's not either from either, kid. The entire world I knew is gone. And for the record, I'm just gonna shut out the slaughtering people comment. Hey, if the Avatar disappeared for 100 years, and this kid is supposed to be that same Avatar, how old would you say he is, Kurama? I'd say about 112 tops chronologically. As I said before, we're both old farts compared to this kid, no matter if he's older than everyone here excluding you and I. I've got at least 4,000 years on you, kid, where you have at least 5,000 years on this little. That would make sense, he's like me in that aspect, I guess. We're both much older than we actually appear. You're only as young as you feel, kid. Even though I'm chronologically old, I feel spry as hell. My sentiments are exactly like Kurama. As the waterbending ceremony concluded with a monumental display of skill and finesse, there was literally no one in the room not clapping. Naruto himself clapped lightly to get on the good side of the guards on each side of him. Deciding not to wait any longer and to be noticed at long last. Naruto walked over to the man not as elderly as the one leading the demonstration, but a great deal older than the youths who had locked eyes with him before. Due to the fact that he had walked past the vicinity of the guards, they were quick to try to restrain him before he got within 12 steps of their chieftain, only for one to be thrown to the left casually, and for the other to judo flipped over the blonde's right shoulder. A few gasps echoed across the hall, as several waterbenders including the eldest man stood in front of their chieftain, ready to attack this strange newcomer at any waking moment. "You'll have to forgive me for that small display of physical violence, Chieftain Arnuk. Your guards were starting to get a little too touchy-feely for my own taste. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Uzumaki Namake's Naruto, a villager from the small town of Baroshi of the Earth Kingdom. A pleasure to make your acquaintance," Naruto said casually, his arms crossed, as his robes slightly fluttered as a breeze passed by. There seemed to be tension in the hall now, many suspicious and wandering eyes looked upon the peculiar visitor with many questions. The eldest man stood forward amongst his pupils, gazing at Naruto with a rather disdainful look. "Forgive us if we don't seem to be hospitable, but people rarely address Chieftain Arnuk without first being addressed themselves. Not only that, but they do not casually use violence on our guards when they are restricted from approaching our leader." Paku answered in a demanding tone, while the sage reacted with an almost challenging smirk in response. "As I said, I'm not one for being detained, regardless of who is doing it, and for whatever reason. As I have stated before, I am of foreign nature to your tribe. I have come here seeking to meet the Avatar. My usual nature is that of a traveling warrior. When I heard of the return of the Messiah of this world, I made it my duty to seek him out. The rumors that passed through the wind told me that this would be his next visit. I can see such tales were not wrong," Naruto stated, as he looked back with his one good eye to gaze in Aang's direction. The Avatar's face, not as suspicious as the others, still maintained a look of question about it. "How do you know of our chieftain's name? You could be a Fire Nation spy sent here to either assassinate Arnuk or the Avatar himself. Your physical appearance is enough to draw questions," Paku almost angrily retorted, to which Naruto laughed in a cast-off manner in response, infuriating the waterbending master further. Brushing his hair out of his face, Naruto turned his back to Paku and to the attention of the table where the Avatar and his company were sitting. "I learned the name of your chieftain from your guards, who sought to detain me immediately upon my appearance. I can only imagine the word of the Avatar's travels gave you time to welcome him with open arms given his status, while I have been treated only with suspicion thus far. It is understandable given how I would say I am very physically different from most people, but it is not entirely inexcusable. Tell me, elderly one, are the people of this tribe so openly hostile to foreigners? I know you have a right to be suspicious of me and my intentions, but your actions seem a bit xenophobic, to be precise," Naruto quipped in an almost arrogant tone, much to Kyuubi's delight. While the sage himself had no desire to cause immediate trouble with the group he was supposed to be spying on, he couldn't help but poke fun at their faults while he had the chance. Before Paku could open his mouth to defend himself, Arnuk stepped forward from the guards who defended him, ready to address the newcomer. "You'll have to forgive our welcoming entourage. The Northern Water Tribe does not often have many visitors, and, as you mentioned beforehand, the status of the newly awakened Avatar gave us reason to prepare beforehand. Tell me, a strange traveler, by what means of transportation did you arrive here?" Arnuk questioned, as the blonde smiled underneath his mask, turning to face the chieftain of the tribe. "As I said to your guards, I swam here. The waters grew ever so frigid through my way here. Once or twice I nearly passed out from exhaustion where the cold water would claim me, but my desire to see the Avatar proved more than enough to allow me to endure for miles upon end. When I feel the need to see something through, I will do it without hesitation. That is the way it has always been for me," Naruto retorted calmly, earning a few small gasps from the room, as well as many questioning looks of disbelief and further suspicion. To swim for so long in the open ocean without drowning, passing out from exhaustion, getting eaten by sharks or dying from hypothermia in such a large body of water for miles upon end seemed almost inhuman. Sokka was the most skeptical of anyone in the room, standing up to address the foreign man himself. "And how do we know you're telling the truth? You could have made your way here with a proper boat," Sokka shouted out loud, earning a small look from his sister in the process. Naruto chuckled in response, and turned his head halfway to look at the boy with the pigtail. "The guards who I encountered at first can vouch for me having no boat. They saw me spring from the waters upon the docks firsthand. If you travel with the Avatar, then you should know that I did not have the luxury of having to ride upon my personal flying bison to get here. A strange creature that I've seen a lot of marvels of nature in my day, but that one seems more than a bit special," Naruto added, remembering the shaggy creature he passed on the way to the hall. At first he thought the creature to be some sort of flying fluffy dragon, until he noticed the mammalian features upon its face that separated it from being connected to any reptilian heritage. It looked like a noble creature despite a rather simple demeanor that set itself upon its face. He would have liked to go over to it and feel its fur, but but he didn't want to throw the guards like ragdolls so early on into his visit. Arnuk coughed slightly to interrupt the small awkward silence put between Sokka and Naruto, gaining the attention of the golden-haired youth. Naruto, was it? If what you claim is true that you indeed swim all the way here, you are either a very determined man or a very crazy one. Nonetheless, I can respect such willpower. As you have come to know, I am Chieftain Arnuk, leader of the Northern Water Tribe. It is a pleasure to meet such a unique-looking person outside of this tribe. I must say that your physical appearance is very much an enigma in relation to our own people. Arnuk chuckled with a smile, as he extended his hand, as a sign of friendship, to which Naruto firmly clasped to shake with respect. Pakku rolled his eyes at his chieftain's typical trusting behavior. The Avatar was a noteworthy exception to extend humility and respect to, but for such a strange-looking foreigner to show up announced with no attempt at earlier word of an expected arrival shouldn't have been accepted so gingerly. Naruto flipped some of his long golden hair out of the way of his mask, looking at the chieftain straight in the eye with an adamant look underneath his mask. Chieftain Arnuk, it doesn't take an observant eye to know that ever since I've entered this tribe I have been looked at very strangely, and with much suspicion. This is excusable given my rather peculiar appearance, and having no relationship with either water tribe whatsoever. However, such suspicion and xenophobia are the key benefactors that aid wars against people of different ethnicities. I suggest you keep this in mind in the future, Naruto determinedly stated, as many eyebrows narrowed in anger, and even further suspicion against him. Pakku was the strongest among them to glare at Naruto, something the blonde returned with his one good azure eye. You herself did not know what to think of this strange man, rather wanting to know himself than judge him solely on the fact that he was a foreigner. You should hold your tongue, boy. Such direct impudence to our chieftain himself is near inexcusable, especially for one outside our tribe. Pakku started angrily, but Naruto did not falter. It is not impudence. If anything, it is the exact opposite. It is wisdom. I've given your chieftain advice on how to deal with people outside of his homeland. Perhaps if more people had followed what I have stated, the war with the Fire Nation would die down a bit due to a time built upon considerable patience and respect for a person's heritage regardless of ethnicity. Naruto retorted with a small bit of fire present in his voice, as Pakku's glare continued to strengthen under Naruto's words. As a show of good faith to this tribe, under your permission, Chief Arnuk, I would like to showcase a demonstration of skill to entertain you all. Your previous ceremony was to welcome the Avatar himself, who now sits in your midst, allowing me to honor the strength of your tribe with my own skills. The youthful sage quipped, earning a challenged look from Pakku. And what makes you think we desire a demonstration of your skills? This tribe is full of elite waterbenders under my tutelage. I doubt whatever skills you have or are of much importance and relevance to our own strength. Pakku practically smirked, earning a small glare from Katara in the distance. She did not want to judge the man she would come to ask to teach her further waterbending arts, but he reminded her much of the chauvinism her own tribe had displayed for a long while. Her brother had been much more of a sexist previous to their departure, but had grown to respect the strength of women following their meeting with the Kyoshi warriors led by a woman named Suki. My father and mother, Abad and Nahana, are both an earthbender and waterbender respectively. They taught me much before I left my village before my departure. As a traveling warrior, I alone also possess what the villagers of Baroshi call the pure physical strength. I am physically very powerful, and I possess adequate control over 2 of the elements. Maybe you should reserve judgment of my skills after you actually see them, Aji-san. Naruto chuckled challengingly, still sticking to the fabrication of his background while making up the names of a fake mother and father on the fly. Pakku raised an eyebrow at the last word Naruto had used, something the blonde mentally cursed himself from uttering. Aji-san? What kind of word is that? And what language does it hail from? Certainly none that I have ever heard of. Pakku started with a slight tone of frustration in his mind. Naruto rolled his eyes, as he prepared to make another excuse, though what he was about to tell wasn't a complete lie to say the least. The villagers of Baroshi are somewhat secluded from the events relating to the war between the Fire Nation and the world. They live in a world enveloped in the past and ensnared in tradition, the very reason why I left. From what I know, my time in Baroshi educated me with a rather old dialect of the Earth Kingdom, something that nearly all of the people I've come across in my travels are unfamiliar with. And to answer your question, Aji-san means old man, which if I have not gone blind in my other eye, I can tell which you are. Naruto laughed, as many gasps of shock echoed across the halls, as Pakku himself grew ever so angry with the newcomer at hand. Old man? It is apparent your village did not teach you much in respecting your elders, boy. You shall refer to me as Master Pakku while you stay in our premises. Pakku snapped, somewhat infuriated. I have not come to know you as a master, nor did I learn what I have gained under your tutelage. You are no master to me until you prove your superiority over me, Naruto casually responded, as veins began to throb from Pakku's head impatience. Is that a challenge, boy? Pakku retorted, No, merely a statement. I have no wish to fight someone like you, not out of fear, but simply because there would not be much honor in it. Chieftain Arnuk, have you considered my offer? Naruto said, as he casually shrugged off another argument with Paku, earning an intensified glare from the waterbending master, as the chieftain considered the youth's request. Sighing softly, Chieftain Arnuk nodded his head softly for Naruto to begin, much to the shock and displeasure of Paku. Naruto turned to greet his crowd, and bowed with his hands folded in an honorable manner. He walked over casually to where the waterbenders led by Paku had performed their ceremony, and slowly entered a fighting stance. Turning his back to his audience, Naruto slammed his right foot so hard against the ground it shattered it. The same act happened with his left foot shortly after. Raising both of his arms slowly towards the ceiling, as they shook, and concentration, the area began to softly rumble, as the noises grew ever louder. As the sounds grew ever louder, some of the guards began to lose their balance, as those who were sitting down including the avatars started to fall to their sides. Shit, this is slightly more difficult than I remember. Giving up on Kid already? Hardly. But bending the powers of nature on a whim without a release technique enabled before such a demonstration of power isn't exactly easy. Hell, I hardly remember anyone from our time doing such things often. Don't tell me you're gonna start pulling excuses out of your ass as to why you can't do things? As if, let's show 'em what we can do, Naruto growled slightly, as he concentrated further, sinking his feet deeper into the broken ice below him for support. Then suddenly, like a roar of thunder echoing in the clouds, a large pillar made of sheer ice rocketed from the ground, nearly devastating the stadium which he was based on, as well as almost colliding with the ceiling. Many eyes were now widened in awe, while others still maintained a look of skepticism, most notably Paku and Sokka. Extending his hands forward, Naruto's fingers shook, as they literally began to mold and weave a shape within the pillar from the inside out. An equally large figure began to form inside the ice, much to the shock of all those present, even Paku. What Naruto was performing was a sort of indirect waterbending, literally crafting the inside of the ice with the essence of water to form the shape he wanted on a whim. At first it had appeared the boy was merely concentrating for another earthbending display, when in reality he had been discreetly waterbending immediately after his impressive display. What are you making? Or should I say, who are you making? One of the women I saw sitting down earlier. With any luck, they'll like this sort of treat. Crushing on the Water Nation girls already, Kit? Of course not, just finding a way to honor them as well, though I have to admit, both of those girls were actually really pretty. Ha, so much for not falling for them, shuddered Kurama. With any luck the one I'm forming is the one guards kept on calling Princess Yu. I'm figuring that it might be the one with the white hair and the noble clothing. That seems like the best guess to go on so far. And if it isn't, then I hope they like massive ice sculptures of their women, cause they're about to get one. Naruto clenched his teeth as he focused on putting on the finishing touches on the unseen statue, memorizing the physical attributes and appearance of the silver-haired girl he had seen in his time in the dining hall. Clenching his fists to finish the artwork, Naruto released his grip on the inner figure and took a moment to regain his composure. After about 7 seconds, Naruto took a running start at the statue, as several eyes widened with surprise at the sudden physical rush. Leaping forward at his target, Naruto let out a small, but fully voiced battle cry, as punched the pillar with a considerable amount of his strength behind the blow. A very small, but visible shockwave emitted from the tower of frozen water, as a result. As the sage stepped back 10 paces from the pillar, at first nothing seemed to occur, but within the next 7 seconds large cracks began to show themselves present in the tower. In no time at all, cracks of all shapes and sizes started to appear all over the pillar. The sounds of bending and breaking ice rippled through the room like a drop of water in a pond. Within the next 20 seconds the pillar rapidly crumbled apart, large chunks of ice shattering against the ground, as each section broke away. As the dust by the falling tower cleared, a figure was visible amongst the mist. When the cloud itself had all but been dispersed, therein stood a 15-foot statue of the Northern Water Tribe's own Princess Yu. There were several gasps, as well as numerous ahs of wonder at the practically flawless replica of the royal beauty herself. Not one detail about the statue was wrong. It reassembled you to a key. The facial features seemed almost alive despite it being obviously inanimate. The clothes adorning the statue had actually been created using a separate line of coating by blending water with ice. Even the princess's rather complex hairstyle was integrated perfectly into the mix, everything standing where it should be. Naruto turned to face his audience proudly, lightly bowing before them in response to the silence. Yu herself was the first one to begin clapping, albeit lightly, but when the other members present were witnessing that their princess herself had been entertained by the performance, they began to cheer as well. Even Paku lightly applauded Naruto's skill, so he did not do so without the slightest bit of hesitation. So cool, this guy's an awesome bender, earthbending and waterbending with such quick precision and talent. Maybe I should ask him to be my earthbending teacher? If we're really lucky, maybe he'd even want to come with us after we're done here. I could have done that if I could earthbend or waterbend or bend at all whatever. That certainly was quite impressive. Apparently this guy wasn't bluffing when he said he was talented in earthbending and waterbending, but how in the world did he waterbend that statue from the inside out? I didn't even think something like that was possible. Maybe Master Paku can do it, but I'm not sure if he could shatter a pillar of that size with one punch alone, which also proves Naruto's physical strength is quite prominent as well. Such were the thoughts of the Avatar and his entourage. Naruto hadn't looked any of them directly in the eyes as they pondered his skill, but he could just imagine their surprise to begin with. The girl with the white hair seemed particularly impressed by Naruto's performance, which would quickly prove to be a benefactor in his favor. Arnuk walked up to Naruto while slowly clapping, bowing slightly to the sage out of respect, to which Naruto returned the gesture with a similar kowtow. It appears your strengths were not false claims, Naruto. You truly do have all the talents you described, of both bending two of the arts, and possessing immense physical strength as well. Not only have you proven to me that you are indeed the warrior you claim to be, you honor me and this tribe by presenting a gift as lovely as this, a statue carved of earthbending and waterbending together to create an exact replica of Princess Yu, my very daughter, and future leader of this village. Arnuk smiled heartily as he bowed to Naruto once more out of respect, to which the sage looked at Yu out of the corner of his azure eye. The chieftain's daughter, huh? Looks like your deduction was correct, kid. And a thumpin' good guess it was too. You lucked out for once, boy. I'm surprised it sat so well with him. While some fathers would be impressed by such an action, others would probably be pissed that I used my powers to create a replica of their daughter. I don't know why he would be angry. It's not like you made the statue ugly or insulting or anything like that. And besides, it's not like you're hitting on her yet. Do you really have to come to the assumption that I'm trying to get with her? I'll admit, she's very pretty, and most likely a good person if her father is this nice, but I'm not trying to sweep the princess off her feet or anything like that. Well, given the fact that you were supposed to have 9 wives back in our time, I've pegged you as something like a mortal playboy. Gee, thanks. Hey, the most powerful demon of all time just acknowledged you have significant prowess over the opposite sex. You're probably the first and only mortal who will ever receive such a compliment. Be grateful for it. You make a good point. Thanks, Kurama, for real. Naruto began to walk over to the now standing Princess Yu, who herself was pacing towards the blonde's direction. As their paths met, Yu looked up at the tall figure and stared at the azure, pale green eye underneath a rather intimidating mask. The princess bowed slightly out of respect, much to the shock of some of the royals, and Paku himself. Naruto placed his right hand against his chest and bowed in return, staring into the azure eyes of the white-haired beauty. Thank you for your demonstration, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. The skill you've demonstrated is most talented. The combination of 2 of the arts in such unison I have never seen before. It was a wonderful demonstration. Nor have I ever witnessed such physical strength before, not even from our mightiest warriors, and being able to create a statue from within waterbending is equally impressive. I also must thank you for your gift. You didn't have to make a statue of me though. You could have made one of anyone here, but I don't mean to sound ungrateful though. Once more, thank you, you said softly, her blue eyes staring into the stranger's face. Her voice was as lovely and soft as the petals of a sakura blossom. Naruto stared at the girl from behind his mask, and he was reminded of the strong but gentle determination of Hyuga Hinata, one of the women who would have become one of his brides, and more notably was one of the women from the very beginning who had always admired him from afar. The thoughts of his pale-eyed mistress both hurt and enthralled him. He blushed slightly underneath his mask while thinking of his Hyuga lover, remembering her fond embrace all too well. You are too modest, NaruHarem. While it is good that you have a sense of self-modesty, always remember that you yourself deserve as much praise as anyone else. You'll have to forgive me though, NaruHarem. I wasn't able to replicate your shape completely. While I will admit that my own work is impressive, it is but a flawed duplicate of the original model, which if I may so is much more beautiful in comparison, Naruto stated somewhat meekly, scratching the back of his head in embarrassment. While in truth he would have been the husband of 9 different females in his past life, he still considered himself to be terrible at terms that came to romance. The sage also remembered that when he gave compliments to a woman he had thought he loved, Hirano Sakura, he squinted in remembrance of the painful beatings he had taken when he uttered a word of praise. Naruto wasn't one to judge, but he didn't think you would be the type of woman to slug him when given a compliment, even if it was a half-assed, cheesy one. Despite his own doubt of his way with women, the silver-haired princess now displayed a deep blush of her own, somewhat daunted that the mysterious man had complimented her so. She would never openly admit it, but she often desired a straightforward romance. So many men of her tribe had never been open with her about their feelings about the watchful, and often overprotective, eyes of her bodyguards, and many of the males were even meek in approaching their own chieftain to confess their feelings for his own daughter. Paku had continued to glare ever so eagerly in Naruto's direction for trying to step outside his station, while Sokka also shot off a look that contained skepticism and a hint of anger, but its true intention was that of immediate jealousy. Aang, while biologically 112 years old, still had the mind of a mere child, and did not exactly register any romantic tension due his childhood ignorance, while Katara, on the other hand, like anyone else, had fully registered what was going on. She couldn't help but smirk and stifle a chuckle in response to her brother's quite obvious infuriation, but then she couldn't help but wonder if the blonde truly meant to compliment her in such a way or if it was in fact unintentional, and a clumsy come on at best. Coughing lightly to break the tension and silence in between them, Naruto extended one of his hands towards the princess, to which she took without hesitation, as the two shared a firm but gentle handshake. After the physical contact had passed, you looked up to the foreigner with a question in her eyes. Excuse me, Naruto, but what does Harem mean? Is that another word of the dialect that your town of Baroshi used? I only say such things because, like Master Paku, that is another word that sounds most unfamiliar. You stated gently to the sage, as Naruto was smiling behind his mask the whole time. You are correct to assume that word belongs to that ancient language. In Baroshi the term Harem means princess, which factually you are. I not only use this term to be correct in my standing to you, but, as a compliment, as well. As you can imagine from my description, Baroshi was not exactly a village adorned with nobles. All the villagers of that town, including myself, do not have any royal status whatsoever. So usually calling someone Harem, usually a girl mind you, would be a term to show respect and sometimes endearment. Naruto finished calmly. Before you could open her mouth to respond, she was interrupted by a rather cumbersome cut-off from a certain southern tribe boy. Keep your hands where I can see 'em, pretty boy. You're speaking to the princess of the Northern Water Tribe. She doesn't need some weirdo foreigner trying to mosey up to her. Sokka rudely interrupted, pointing a finger right in between Naruto's mask to use shock, and to his sister's dismay. He was quickly pulled away by the ear by his sister, who proceeded to practically chuck him down in his seat and give him an icy glare before turning to face Naruto. You'll have to forgive my brother Sokka. He unfortunately learned his manners from more than half of the men at my tribe before they went off to fight. Such traits include a chauvinism that is recently starting to decline within him, but more prominently rudeness to complete strangers. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Katara of the Southern Water Tribe. As I said beforehand, you've already had the unfortunate honor of meeting my brother Sokka, and this is Avatar Aang, the newfound protector of this world, the young Inuit woman said, gesturing to her scowling brother, herself, and Aang throughout the midst of her sentence. Aang was the next one to introduce himself, greeting Naruto with a customary bow, and looking up at him with rather curious, childish envy. How did you do that? Half that stuff you displayed just a moment ago. It was really awesome. Your parents must have been really good trainers in order for you to harness such skills. Aang somewhat energetically exploded, startling Naruto a bit, as he casually took a step back. He knew his skills were impressive in the standards of the benders of this time, but he honestly didn't expect such a small display of his power to have this big of an impact. That, and the fact that the person who was made out to be the scourge of the earth by Azula seemed to be even more of a child than he had descriptions of beforehand. It seemed more than 100 years of being absent from the world had not influenced this boy's maturity. The persona he was displaying so far reminded him much of a combination of his deceased friends Rock Lee and Konohamaru. A rather chipper little savior, aren't you? Naruto jokes, as he squinted his eyes observing the boy's mannerisms, to which Aang rubbed the back of his head in an embarrassed fashion. You attempted to get another word in, but was interrupted once more by Sokka, who this time remained seated. Just a question, tough guy. What are you wearing that mask for anyway? Sokka inquisitively asked, receiving the almost expected narrowing of eyes from Katara. To hide my face, I thought that's what masks did, Naruto casually retorted, earning a small chuckle from you and Katara in the process. Aang tried to stifle a bit of a snort at Naruto's rather blunt answer, but had to let off a small giggle despite Sokka's continued infuriation. Cute, I thought I was the only person who used sarcasm, the southern warrior replied. I wasn't being sarcastic. You asked a question, I gave you an answer. The youthful ancient states, causing Sokka to facepalm and look towards Naruto once again with skepticism. What I meant was, what exactly are you hiding your face for? Are you ugly or something? Sokka snorted and began to snicker, earning a smack to the back of the head from his sister. The blonde laughed casually, sighing slightly at the boy's rather moot point. Naruto himself remembered when he had thought the same of Madara even before he had begun to question his false identity as Toby, of who was behind the mask, and what they looked like to begin with. And even when his true name had come to be known, and the mask had been shattered, he had admitted that the end result was a bit anticlimactic to his own expectations. Behind all that power, ingenuity, and bravado Uchiha Madara, the real identity of the one called Tobi, was nothing more than a bitter, resentful old man who had an unfulfilled grudge against the world. It would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic, but Kurama had laughed about the irony of it regardless. Funny, I had processed the very same thought about people who wear masks in my earlier years of traveling. What I learned is that sometimes what you expect to be under it can either be a very astonishing secret, or a very anticlimactic build-up. If I had to give an opinion about myself under this mask is that I don't consider myself to be a handsome rogue, but just a bit over what females, and some males think of, as physically attractive, Naruto stated in a modest tone, not wanting to come off as an arrogant prig in front of any of the inhabitants of the Northern Water Tribe, especially their princess. Well, at least you're level-headed about your appearance, unlike a certain someone I know, Katara added smugly while smirking at Sokka, who proceeded to stick his tongue out in retribution. Naruto chuckled softly, but then noticed that there was a certain closeness between himself and Princess Yu, something the guards had started to take note of, as they began to walk to his sides, only to be stayed by Yu's hand. Pardon me for my physical intrusion of your space, Naruto, but may I ask a favor of you? Yu questioned, the sage nodding slightly in response. May I touch your hair? I've never seen someone with the color of your hair in all my life, nor have I seen a person's hair grow to the length yours has. As my father said, it is quite an enigma amongst my people. If you don't want me to, I understand. Yu asked softly, as Naruto's eyes shone slightly in his own further remembrance of Hinata due to the modesty, beauty, and almost shyness of this princess. I hate to intrude, but is it okay if I do the same if I allow Princess Yu to? For curiosity's sake is all, my reasons are the same as Her Highness's, Katara commented, approaching the blonde at a similar physical radius, as well. Unlike Sokka, who was currently fuming at Yu's early fascination with this strange foreigner, Aang didn't interpret Katara's curiosity as anything romantic. Heck, even he wanted to feel what this guy's hair felt like eventually. I have no problem with either of your respective interests, you may both do what you want, Naruto replied calmly, earning small head nods from both Water Tribe women alike. Yu started feeling the long strands of golden locks between her soft fingertips on the right of Naruto, while Katara carried out the same motions on the opposite side of the mystery youth. Naruto closed his eyes calmly, as the two began to stroke his hair ever so softly, as he let out a small, but content sigh, as the motions of their hands through his follicles continued. Many of the nobles were now giving Naruto questioning, and even infuriated looks at how he managed to conjure such respect and curiosity out of their fair princess. While not smitten with the young man, she had certainly shown a fair amount of interest in him. After about half a minute of feeling Naruto's hair, the two women ceased their motions, both bearing satisfied looks on their faces. I take it I have satiated your curiosity, ladies? Forgive me if my hair was rather frigid. My tales about swimming here are not false, I assure you, Naruto said, as he chuckled to himself. While had not swam the full distance he had claimed to have, he still considered swimming even a mile in the icy waters quite unpleasant, even with the Kyuubi's chakra coating his body with its heat. Thank you for indulging us, Naruto, and I must say your hair is quite softer than I expected. Given that it's so long and is rather spiky, I expect it to be quite frigid even when not introduced to cold waters, but its texture has surprised me rather pleasantly. I find it quite soft, silky even, Yu stated, as she put a finger to her chin trying to describe the feel of it, as Katara turned to her in agreement. Yeah, I was just about to say the same thing. It is quite soft given its appearance. Personally, given how long and how much of it there is, I actually thought it might have felt a bit shaggier like Appa's fur, Katara commented while chuckling slightly, as Naruto gave an expression of mock hurt underneath his mask. So I am comparable in texture to your flying bison now? What an honor, Naruto said, as he feigned being insulted, earning a bit more laughter out of the group. Even Sokka had to chuckle a bit at the notion. Naruto focused his attention on Aang now, looking him dead in the eye with a certain tone of seriousness about him. Aang, wasn't it? I have heard many tales about you, Avatar, some marvelous, and some demeaning. But even before your return I was familiar with your legacy. My own mother and father often told tales to the children of my village that the Avatar would return someday to save the world and spread a light that would penetrate the darkness of war. I have come across rumors in my travels that you are not exactly a bending adept like your predecessors, most notably Avatar Roku. If such tales are true, I presume that you have come here to perfect your water bending from the masters here? Naruto inquired while once more half lying about how he heard of this Avatar's lack of experience. No one seemed to be making accusatory remarks about his background or if the town of Baroshi was in fact a fictional location, so his string of white lies could continue unaltered for the moment. For the most part, one think I've nearly got my waterbending down. I just need the skills of a well-versed waterbender to help completely hone my skills in that area. But in response to your earlier statement, yeah, my friends, and I did come here to hopefully find tutelage for me under the expertise of a master, Aang replied cheerfully, intent on asking for Paku to take him under his wing. as soon as possible. I see. Tell me, Avatar Aang, you eventually do learn all you need to confront Fire Lord Ozai. Will you do what must be done in order to end his reign over this world? Naruto questioned with a small smirk underneath his mask, already knowing Aang's obvious answer. You and Katara both drew concerned looks on their faces, knowing full well what Naruto was referencing. If you're asking me whether or not I'd consider killing Ozai, the answer is no. I will not use my powers to take a life. Aang replied somewhat sharply, a small tone of offensive presence in his voice, much to Naruto's delight. Truly? No matter the cost? Even when living in such a small settlement like Baroshi, I knew full well of Ozai's atrocities committed upon this earth. So many have been persecuted by him, and so many more have died by the command of endless soldiers under his wing. You do realize if you do indeed spare Ozai, your reputation, as the Avatar might not exactly be saved? After all, letting the very man who's caused so much death and destruction upon the land, and so many thousands of people live to see another day, will most likely make you many more enemies than you already have. Naruto stated factually, earning a very small glare from Katara in the presence who was willing to stand up for her friend. Aang isn't a murderer. He does not take the life of a person who takes life to seek an end of justification. I was taught that revenge was petty where I came from, and actively seeking to cause pain to one person who wronged you was a shallow act within itself. Katara retorted calmly, not wanting to cause any tension between her and Naruto, but wanting to defend Aang's beliefs as well. Murdering and killing are two completely different things, Katara. Murdering is done by spilling the blood of an innocent. Killing is often done to end the life of your enemy who should be punished for his or her crimes upon the earth, and to be brought to a permanent justice in which their evil is forever silenced. And revenge in itself isn't completely petty. Granted that if you lose focus of who you were out to destroy originally, and make the world your target instead, then revenge is very petty in that retrospect. However, focused and properly motivated vengeance can often benefit more than just yourself. It will most likely benefit others as well, Naruto replied. And you'd use such excuses to justify the means to an end to kill someone? Isn't that somewhat above our stations as humans? To be a judge, jury, and executioner to another person seems to be beyond our station. Those who've stepped beyond such boundaries have ended up like Ozai. You remarked softly, knowing full well the burden that war had brought upon both her people and the people of the world itself. Ozai's goal within itself wasn't inherently wicked at first. He seeks what his grandfather Sozin did, unification between the four nations. I've read of Sozin's time on Earth, and how he started this 100-year war to begin with. His goals were admirable, but his intention in seeing them through was corrupt. You cannot force people under unity. Such a process takes time and patience, clearly which Sozin had none of. It pains me to see such a mistake repeated through the leadership of his own grandson, who like his own father the former Fire Lord Azula has not learned from Sozin's mistakes. Usually only the spirits, or whatever god a person believes in alone has the duty of being a judge, jury, and executioner to a mortal in his or her afterlife. However, I have realized over time that sometimes such things need to be done through a person's hands alone, despite whatever emotional conflict with it they have. In my travels I have encountered many people who couldn't be dissuaded for their often vile endeavors, more than half of whom crossed paths with me in the most violent of ways. Often, I did not wish for conflict, but I almost had no choice in the matter to begin with. When my hand was forced, sometimes I chose to kill the people who I believed would not change themselves, with hearts so black that they rivaled the darkness of the night. I am my own judge, jury, and executioner, and I will not be bound to a moral code relating to deities of any sort in order to restrain from not doing what must be done. Naruto adamantly finished, earning a good share of gasps from those around him listening in to their conversation, while you and Katara themselves both bore looks of both shock and awe upon their faces. Aang himself looked conflicted about Naruto's words, where Sokka's glare of skepticism just continued to have reason to grow. So you've killed people before, charming? Sokka started adding his 2 cents into the conversation, trying to lighten the somewhat grim mood. Often when I had no other choice, some people who are kept alive to be given chances at redemption often do not learn of the error of their ways and repeat their mistakes, restarting a cycle of tragedy and misfortune upon all they come across. I have often ended such wheels of fate, ending a cycle often damned to repeat itself. Naruto replied, aren't you worried the spirits will judge you in your afterlife for taking on such a role? I cannot judge you for the things you believe to be right. Your determination in your own cause is admirable if a bit frightening, but I can respect it. You added in, while Katara looked at the water princess with a look of question and surprise. She would have not thought that a person like you would vouch for someone to murder another, but she was quickly reminded that you never actually stated she approved of killing someone, just that she admired Naruto's determination of doing what he believed regardless of what others thought of him for it. Katara has a point. Your spirit could be condemned if you continue down your path, Aang put in worriedly, concerned for the well-being of Naruto's soul. Even if he didn't agree with his methods, he had been brought to believe by his former mentor and teacher Xiao that all life was sacred, regardless of their decisions while they were in mortal realm. If my earlier statement didn't make my view clear on deities and religion, allow me to express it more thoroughly. I pray to no one. If there is a God, or if the heavens do in fact exist, then they may judge me as they fit once I enter their realm, but before I do I shall commit my life to do what I believe is right regardless of whatever consequences I take with me in the next life. Naruto replied softly, earning a somewhat respectful smile from the avatar in the process. Regardless whether or not Naruto's soul would be condemned in the eyes of the heavens for his deeds on earth, at least Aang could rest a bit easier knowing that the blonde was at least content with his actions, and ready to face the judgment of any existing deities upon his transfer to the spirit world. Sokka stepped forward ever so slightly, a questioning look upon his face that showed more curiosity than ill will for once. So does that make you an atheist, Naruto? I mean, you said you prayed to no one, which would imply you do not believe in one true God or several deities, but you're willing to accept said God or God's judgment if they do truly exist once your soul transcends past the earth. So with that in mind, what do you believe in? The southern tribe warrior asked the sage, who in response raised an eyebrow underneath his mask. You're much smarter than you let on, Sokka. It's a clever disguise. Naruto replied in a half-joking manner, earning a nod of agreement with Sokka, who only caught up with the fact that it could have been an insult 5 seconds afterwards. In relation to my own religious beliefs, I believe that I don't believe until I can see what the truth before me is. Balancing faith with logic is quite the challenge, and many consider it often close to heretical. But I will do what I must, regardless of people's criticism or lack of acceptance, Naruto said. Sokka nodded in his head with a look of acceptance upon it, finally coming to understand the blonde in some way despite his mysterious demeanor. Avatar Aang, you should go talk to that man called Paku. There is skill and experience in his eyes. If you are seeking tutelage from a master, I'd go to him, Naruto commented. As Aang nodded in agreement, walking over to address his apprenticeship to Paku, Katara followed right behind her avatar friend in hopes of also learning under the guidance of a waterbending master. Naruto turned his head to you and Sokka to seek a different topic that differed from stances on killing and religion, only to be interrupted by the sound of multiple trumpets. Several royal guards made their way into the dining hall, as several water tribe women followed in unison to welcome a coming royal into the midst of the nobles. The figure who entered was a teenage boy similar in age to Sokka, though just from a physical outlook there were several differences. Her skin was a much lighter color than the dark tone of both Sokka and Katara's, applying a slightly different heritage from the Inuits or perhaps an Inuit mother and Caucasian father or vice versa. His clothes like Yu's were of noble status, but his presence of being royalty had already literally announced itself for him to the point where no one wouldn't be able to tell he was a noble. The teen bore a strong cleft chin with blue eyes similar to Sokka's, but the look upon his face showed signs of possible conceit or vanity, something that Naruto had judged for himself. Arnuk was the first to welcome the new coming royal, walking up to him and bowing out of respect, which the teen did at least have the courtesy to return with a bow of his own. Our Lord Han, what a surprise to see you so early. I will admit it is most unexpected. I had been told that you were to arrive tomorrow, the chieftain commented with the smallest bit of weariness in it that was detected by the nearby sage, noting Arnuk's rather tired-sounding voice. I had tried to send word that I would be arriving sooner than expected, Chieftain Arnuk. Unfortunately, you must have been so preoccupied making way for the avatar that you did not hear of my impending arrival. I'll let it go this time though, considering he is the messiah of this world, and all. Han scoffed, as he feigned hurt, trying to force a laugh out of the room in the process. The teen looked at the avatar for a moment, studying him almost, but then turned his attention to you upon the rather quick assumption that the newfound savior wasn't worth talking to. Han had expected a warrior of old, not a mere child. Fighting alongside an avatar who would be Roku's reincarnation had originally thrilled him, until he saw the rather jubilant demeanor of the boy who was supposed to be said avatar. As Han made his way to you, he practically pushed Naruto aside on his way to get to her, something that the sage would have originally returned with his own less than pleasant words, only to be reminded that he was trusted little enough by the people already. He didn't need to go bash a royal of theirs in order to gain further hostility. My princess, you are looking as enchanting as ever. I must say our engagement has lasted a bit long for my taste though. Perhaps within the next few weeks we can be wed to unite under us the stars faster. Does that not sound appealing to you? Han almost suggestively implied, much to Sokka's annoyance, as his eyebrows began to have seizures in response to this new-coming teen's less than subtle approach. Naruto had to refrain from sighing heavily under Han's somewhat overbearing ego, to which even the physically distant Katara felt the slight taste of vomit in her mouth after feeling the arrogance of this new noble from literally 10 feet away. I cannot wait for my Lord Han. I look forward to the day when I can call you my husband, Yu answered politely, as she could, much hesitance, and perhaps a bit of sorrow evident in her voice to both Naruto and Sokka. Han smiled like an eel, and offered his hand to his princess, to which he took her hand in his own, and pressed his lips down upon her forehand, all the while Sokka resisted the urge to projectile vomit in Han's direction. I look forward to the day where both Prince Han and Princess Yu lead this village under an honorable banner against the Fire Nation. It will be the first of my glorious feats to be led against that doggo Zai, Han proudly proclaimed while clenching a fist in an over-exuberant passion, to which Arnuk shook his head in the distance ever so slightly. Han then started to take note of the people around him, most notably the Southern Water Tribe members, and the rather peculiar-looking warrior whose presence in the hallway was most unpleasant to him. Chieftain Arnuk, I must say that I'm rather surprised that you'd let the Southern Tribe rabble into the royal dining hall, even if they were in the company of the Avatar I heard about. And who is this rather unruly-looking foreigner? One of the Avatar's accomplices, or just a stranger with no place amongst our community? Han laughed to himself haughtily. Sokka's incredibly short fuse was moments from going off, and Katara herself was already shooting off one of the nastiest glares she could muster. Even Naruto himself had to shake his head at this boy. He had always resolved never to judge a person before all their cards were put on the table. But this arrogant noble had played a bad hand from the start. Arnuk felt the urge to resist face-palming, and even Pakku was starting to become mildly annoyed. The old waterbending master knew that Lord Han would eventually become a prince when his marriage to Yu would finally take place, in which by tradition he would eventually become chieftain of the Northern Water Tribe following Arnuk's passing. Pakku knew that the nobles often cared little about peasants from either their own nation or the one from the Southern Water Tribe, but the way Han had cast the Avatar so casually annoyed him slightly. The only thing that seemed to save Han's character in Pakku's own mind was calling out Naruto's unknown presence. Before the young lord could further go on with his meager complaints, he noticed a beautiful, 10-foot-tall ice sculpture that was the exact replica of his engagement. He looked at it for a moment in considerable awe given the uncanny likeness, and shot a smirk at Pakku much to the old man's surprise. Master Pakku, you didn't have to devote your skills to make such a gift for my engagement, though I must admit, the detail in it is unusually refined. But I wouldn't expect any less from the waterbending master of the Northern Water Tribe, Han stated in a prideful fashion, only to be interrupted in his moment of bravado by the old man himself. I did not make this statue, Lord Han. It did not come from my bending. It was made by a combination of earthbending and some type of internal waterbending, the latter of which is very to witness even amongst our elite benders. I cannot take credit for this work. If you look to thank anyone, you may thank Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the unruly foreigner you mentioned earlier, the waterbending master replied, to which Han's head whipped in Naruto's direction upon such a statement. Naruto himself was a bit surprised that the old man had admitted it was not his work, and was even more surprised that the esteemed master regarded his bending with praise. Perhaps Pakku did bear a sense of honor and modesty after all, even if it was minuscule and hard to notice on the surface. Han looked at Naruto with a stare that threatened to pierce through ice, but Naruto did not falter, standing his ground with a blank expression behind his mask. If what Master Pakku says is true, then are you the one who has created this physical recreation of my Princess Yu? While I must admire your skills for such bending expertise, I highly advise you remember your station amongst our people. Han venomously spat, to which Sokka felt the overgrowing desire to throw his boomerang at the direction of the noble prig. Pardon? Naruto replied curiously. Princess Yu carries the blood of Water Tribe nobility inside her veins, and that blood will eventually be melded to bring honor to our tribe. Remember that I am not only a peasant, but a foreigner, as well. An attempt to draw closeness to my engagement is not only an offense to me, but a disgrace to this tribe in general. Han angrily retorted to Sage, whose fist started to clench in anger at the impudence this boy was giving him. I haven't tried to court Princess Yu, as you claim. I have only treated her thus far with respect and sentimentality. The statue I made is supposed to be a sign of goodwill and respect towards your people, and even if I am a peasant and a foreigner, I have at least shown that I mean towards this community. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going for a walk to cool my head. Your arrogance is so baffling that I truly am at a loss for words to continue this argument. Naruto huffed in a state of frustration, leaving the dining hall as calmly as he could. As soon as he was no longer within sight, Han began to chuckle and joke around with Arnuk that the security must have been severely lacking to let such an unbalanced foreigner into the tribe at all. Sokka inched his head closer to Yu in order to get her attention, which she started to take notice of. Hey Yu, wanna go for a walk? If you don't mind me saying so, I really don't want to be here anymore. Things just got a little too uncomfortable back there for my tastes. Speaking of which, it looks like things might heat up again soon, so we might want to bolt while we can, Sokka whispered, as he comically motioned to Aang and Katara, whose talk with Pakku was starting to sound like a small argument. Yu nodded in agreement, and let one of the royal guards know that she was off to commence her daily walk, and that the Southern Water Tribe warrior had been invited to partake to keep her company. There were no objections, of course, due to the fact this was the princess herself who wished to have company on a stroll, and Sokka luckily noted that Han seemed to be getting really involved with talking to a crowd of nobles about his regaling tales as a warrior, much to the contented sighs of several young teenagers about his own age. Once the duo was out of the hall, and out in the open, Yu sighed heavily as their trek began. She had not expected Han's arrival so soon in comparison to her father's own surprise. She had preferred not to see him at all, but she knew it was her duty to accept the marriage for what it was regardless of her own personal feelings. Emotions such as want and desire were unfitting of a noble. That's what she was brought up to believe, but deep down she felt that if such traditions limited the role of her actual life itself, imprisoning her behind rules hundreds of years old. Kicking up small pieces nonchalantly, as they walked down the street, Sokka couldn't help but feel a slight bit of guilt for Naruto, and was irritated at the situation you faced given the circumstances. The strange golden-haired teen had apparently been treated with nothing but suspicion, and with admittedly xenophobia since his arrival, while Sokka guiltily noted that he had been who had judged Naruto as such beforehand. However, it appeared that Naruto was truly as modest and good-hearted as he presented himself. Throughout his time in the hall he had not been once impudent to Yu or Arnuk, and treated them with notable respect. The only time he seemed only slightly challenging was when he conversed with Pakku, who Sokka was starting to see as a bit of a jerk, but not as much so as Han. Sokka had heard of engaged marriages back in his own tribe, how two noble families would often propose, and a marriage between two of their children when they came of age. To him, it seemed all sorts of wrong, that someone was destined to be together with someone who they wouldn't know for a good 20 years of their life until to end up with subservient servitude to a person who could be less than distasteful. He still couldn't ponder it. How could a person as sweet and beautiful as you be married to a person as disgusting, conceited, and arrogant as Han? He was obviously not the nicest person around, given how he had judged his sister, himself, and Naruto before they even had spoken to him. But what really burned is how lightly Han was taking his engagement to the princess herself. He made it sound like he was getting more out of the prospect of ruling the tribe than being married to someone like you, something that infuriated Sokka to no end. Sokka had remembered of his previous time spent in his life before he and his sister found Aang in a block of ice, a time before the men went out to war to face Fire Nation forces. That several of them had tried to woo Katara before their departure due to the fact she was the most amiable female in the village near their own age. It wasn't that Sokka minded having an eventual stepbrother. What irritated him was how lenient they were about it. That many of them just acted if Katara had already agreed to be in a relationship with them, despite her ever so obvious resistance to their advances. People who just assumed others belonged to them pissed him off more noticeably people like Han. Princess Yu? That guy you're supposed to marry. Han, do you like him? Sokka asked in a concerned note, wanting to get a straight answer from his princess regardless of his directness. Sokka actually wasn't sure how to tiptoe around such a question, and even if it was inappropriate to ask given his status of being a peasant to want to know such personal feelings, he damn well wasn't going to censor his own thoughts because of it. Yu sighed heavily once more, as she folded her arms gently, stopping only for a moment, but then continuing ahead of Sokka afterwards. It's not a matter of whether or not he holds my Sokka heart, it's a matter of respect for tradition, and fulfilling my duty as one of the future leaders of this tribe. The Water Tribe princess responded in an almost monotone voice, not wanting to show any true feelings on the matter due to the fact she had been taught that, as a royal she always may stay true to tradition, and neutral on personal opinions. But shouldn't you start to question things like that eventually, Princess Yu? I mean no disrespect to in all this especially, but Han's kind of a jerk, Sokka exclaimed, earning a response from the princess that he did not expect. A small chuckle. His eyes widened at the thought that he made her laugh, and seeing her smile made his heart skip a beat. I shouldn't be laughing, but I can't help it. Not many people usually have the stomach for challenging our royalty like you, and Naruto do. It's quite amusing actually, Yu stated, as he continued to giggle, sending butterflies rippling through Sokka's stomach. She was forced to calm herself down when several peasants who passed her, and Sokka took note of her sudden outbreak of laughter, which seemed rather strange for the usually calm Princess Yu to have. Sighing a bit to regain her composure, Yu looked in Sokka's direction, as they continued to walk down the path set in front of them. I shouldn't speak against his lordship in any way, but my future husband is indeed a bit conceited. He often brags of the countless battles he's won, and how he looks forward to leading this tribe alongside me, but I truly wonder if that's the case. Lord Han honestly seems to be more interested in the status of ruling itself rather than truly being my husband. But enough of this talk, we shouldn't be having it. It's not my place to question his motives, my role is to follow and serve him, Yu said almost sadly, as she continued to pace forward, momentarily leaving a disappointed Sokka behind, as he stopped walking for a moment out of sadness himself. Damn it, there's gotta be a way to show Princess Yu that she should follow her own path regardless of these stupid traditions. The spirits know full well such ancient ties have probably held back both of our tribes for years in the things we could accomplish. Our elders are just too stuck up with following rules their great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents set centuries ago. I mean, she's already admitted that Han is a stuck-up little brat of a ruler kinda, in her own words. But if she knows that he's so conceited, then why hasn't she asked Arnuk to try to find her another suitor? Tradition be damned, if I was her in position, thank the spirits I'm not, I'd try to find a much better husband than that. As the two eventually made their way to the very end of the small city, they came upon the docks where boats of both large and small sizes were kept, and the newest addition to the pier was Appa himself, who looked quite content after the long trip to rest for a bit. The sea shimmered upon the light of the sun shining in the horizon, with miles upon miles of ocean going on, as far as the naked eye could see. Yu's eyes shone even brighter in the light than they did before, which caused Sokka to stare for quite a long moment before the princess herself eventually noticed his gaze and giggled softly, the southern warrior blushing scarlet, as he turned his head to hide his shame. One couldn't help but notice a rather tall figure next to Appa, however. A certain sun-kissed haired male stood next to the lovable beast, scratching behind his ears gingerly. Taking this as a sign to start a conversation, Yu walked over to the large bison, as it grumbled contentedly under Naruto's touch. What an amazing creature, surely you must have great fortune upon you to travel in its presence, Sokka, Yu said, as she looked up at the large mammal in awe, its brown eyes reflecting in the sun, as hers did. She nervously reached out her hand to pet the creature, pausing at first due to reflex, before placing her palm on his nose where he mumbled happily, to which Yu couldn't help but smile widely in response. If by luck you mean being chased by firebenders everywhere, then yes, we've been quite lucky, Sokka dryly commented, where both Naruto and Yu had to take a moment to chuckle at the boy's blatant, but most likely truthful statement. Sokka turned his head in Naruto's direction, smirking at the long-haired boy. I see you've met Appa, you two have it off real good already. Usually he's a bit apprehensive about strangers. You must have a thing with animals. Sokka smiled, whereas the shinobi couldn't help but laugh at the irony of Sokka's statement. I have to admit, approaching this guy, I was wondering if he was going to be aggressive to me or not. Turns out, he's really just a lovable puppy, albeit a 3-ton, flying mammalian puppy. Upon getting to know this big goof, I gotta say that Aang is actually a pretty lucky guy to have him as a pet. It'd sure be awesome to have a friend like this to fly you everywhere at your leisure, Naruto stated casually, looking at Apps with a sincere smile filled with respect for the noble beast. It reminded him much of an actual Biju, just much less aggressive, and not nearly as big, a sort of mini Biju in his own mind. Looking at Yu in a state of concentration, the princess could tell what was on his mind. It had to be addressed sooner or later, why not now? I'm sorry, my engaged Lord Han, treated with such callousness, Naruto. I know you did not mean to offend my tribe in any way through your respect. Han unfortunately does not see the kindness that you have offered my people. He never did appreciate the skills and abilities of foreigners. It's a part of the royal family curse, I'm afraid. Nobles often judge those below their status of being unworthy of both their time, as well as their peoples, though even peasants are treated better than the foreigners, who are mainly seen as lice embedded within the skin of an animal. You sadly noted. You have no need to apologize to me, Yuheim. The dishonor was Han's, not yours, and I believe that even though my actions were out of personal attraction, I do not view such emotions as offensive. Love cannot be restrained by status. It is not such a simple thing to contain. Naruto smiled almost goofily, to which Yu blushed slightly at his words, both agreeing with his opinion, and slightly awed by the fact that the boy would stand up for his emotions if he truly did feel such a way about her. You aren't afraid of being ridiculed and mocked by the nobility? Yu asked inquisitively. Of course not. A title may instill status over a people, but man to man or woman to woman, we are all of the same equal worth. Not one of us is better than anyone else. And if I truly did have feelings for someone of noble blood like you, I would not hide them. Love is not something that should be contained, nor should a person be ashamed of who they fall in love with, Naruto said once more, earning a slightly stronger blush from Yu in the process. But this one was more out of respect than a physical embodiment of attraction. You are the wisest, Naruto, and the most kind, as well. There should be more men like you in this tribe, and in the world in general. Perhaps then this war would have ended sooner. I must admit, if I truly had the power to change tradition, my Lord Han would have not been made my suitor, Yu responded solemnly, earning a concern from Sokka, who gingerly put his hand on her shoulder to comfort her. He felt a little disheartened about hearing Yu's praise for Naruto, but to him what was more important was just making sure she was happy. Naruto shook his head from side to side, raising a fist clenched in determination, as his other hand continued to stroke Appa. But you can change tradition, Yuheim. It's all a matter of willpower and belief. People like you cannot be restrained by petty rules that hold back the prowess of what your future can be. If you're the princess, you should be able to marry whoever you want, and you shouldn't have to put up with a self-entitled moron like Han as a partner for the rest of your life," Naruto said passionately, surprising both Sokka and Yu at the blonde's sudden outburst. So many times Naruto had seen politics literally screw over so many good people in his past life. He now had the resolve to change that. "Are you sure I can actually accomplish such things, Naruto? For a princess to step out of her station would be seen as an almost heretical gambit. Not to mention the fact that just women speaking out place within the tribe is reason for ridicule," Yu replied, to which Naruto practically face-palmed at the thought that such chauvinistic preferences were employed by people who from the future, where he thought the relationship between men and women by now would have been in even higher standing than it was in his time. Instead, it had been downgraded considerably. "NaruHarem, a peasant or princess can accomplish anything they set their minds to. It just takes the resolve to do those things through. You are no exception to that rule. Plus, this whole women can't do things men can thing is really starting to get on my nerves. There were plenty of earthbending women back in Baroshi who could wipe the floor with me if they wanted to," Naruto exclaimed, half lying about his past. While Baroshi didn't exist, he knew full well that a lot of the women from his actual past could have decimated him in a fight in his former state. Now, however, was a different picture to be had. You paused for a moment, pondering Naruto's words for a short while, stopping only to stare at both him and the sunset in the distance. She smiled brightly as her head turned to the direction of the sage once more, looking much more content now than she had before. "Thank you for your advice, Naruto. You've given me much to ponder. I'm not sure what I can do to change things around here, if I can change anything at all, but I will at least try altering some of the laws of this tribe when my rule is properly cemented into place," Yu replied gingerly, as both Naruto and Sokka smiled at hearing a refreshing statement for once in the day. Naruto yawned slightly and looked to the direction that the royal hall would be from where he was standing. "NaruHarem, I'm going to go see Xiao, and Katara's talk is going with Master Paku. If you two would want to come along, then are you most welcome," Naruto said, to which Sokka somewhat nervously scratched the back of his head. Actually, I was thinking of asking Princess Yu if she'd like to go for a small flight on Appa's back since she's never flown before." "You know, if she'd like to?" Sokka said, as he forced out an awkward chuckle. Naruto raised an eyebrow suspiciously at first, and then he couldn't help but grin when he realized what Sokka was trying to do. "He's trying to court her even when we both know she has a fiancé. I don't whether or he's brave or stupid. The same could be said of you, Kit. You're being a bit hypocritical right now. At least I have the skill to back up claims. I don't think Sokka is exactly what we'd call a formidable opponent. Just look at him. I can tell you even before he draws a weapon his stance is sloppy." "True enough, I suppose." Yu stepped forward to voice her objection, clearing her throat softly. "Sokka, I don't think we should." "Why not?" "Lord Han is engaged. I don't think it would be proper of me to spend time with another man near his age on any level given our relationship." Sokka began to slump slightly before Naruto decided to add his own 2 cents in. "Well, no one says your little skyward flight has to be a romantic picnic. Why don't you just take a trip in the wind, as friends?" "But won't my Lord Han take offense to even such a simple gesture like that?" Yu asked. "Think about it this way, NaruHarem. This can be your first step of self-assertion. Even if it's in a small way, this could be doing something for yourself that you actually want, not what others want for you," Naruto replied, to which Yu began to smile slightly at the idea. "Very well then, Sokka, I think I'll join you after all," Yu proclaimed, to which Sokka forced a half-hearted smile. "Well then, I think I'll be off. You two play nice up there," Naruto commented casually, while both the princess and the peasant blushed deeply at his implication. "Gee, thanks Naruto, just as friends isn't really going to help me teach her that Han's an idiot and she shouldn't be with him. With your mysterious helpful guy performance, she'll probably start to fall for you instead. Girls always fall for the dark hero bit. Katara nearly did with Jet before she realized he was a moron." Naruto couldn't help but chuckle upon hearing Sokka's thoughts, to which the teens turned back to him in question, where he waved gingerly to cover up any suspicion. As the sage walked away, he couldn't help but glance over his shoulder to look at Yu upon Appa's back, who in turn had also turned her own head to look at him. Yu's blue eyes connected with Naruto's for about 30 seconds before Sokka finally managed to get Apps to take off, much to his delight. Such a strange man, but such a kind, wise one, as well. "No one has ever once tried to tell me I could be anything other than what my station demands, but he believes I have the potential to be whatever I seek to be. He isn't afraid of being singled out by the nobles despite being of no noble blood, and he follows the path he believes regardless of being mocked or ridiculed along the way. And, as anyone could plainly see, he clearly possesses admirable power without flaunting it or even having an overinflated ego behind it. Kind, respectful, powerful, modest, wise, tall, and even a bit witty if only Han possessed such qualities. Even if the potential Naruto believes I have failed me, and I am forever positioned to be a figurehead amongst my people, I would have at least wanted the privilege to be a wife to a man like that someday in my life. It would have been much more honorable than what is to come. Yu's thoughts echoed across her mind, though the water princess was unaware that someone else had heard them. Naruto had gazed directly at Yu's eyes before she had taken to the sky with Sokka, and using his only mental prowess reading inherited by his training, as a sage allowed him to briefly access a door into the mindset of the princess. He smiled brightly upon hearing her thoughts, and then began to jump 20 to 30 feet with each leap in the direction of the icy castle, while many onlookers looked on in awe at the incredible leaping boy. To them what he was performing was physically impossible for any human being, and to enact such a feat so casually was beyond amazing. Within a time period ranging between 2.5 minutes, Naruto landed softly at what was just beyond the top step that led to the castle. The sage still couldn't help but smiled upon what he had learned from one's own mind. I take it you're happy, kid? Why wouldn't I be, Kurama? Maybe because the people of this land only know us as a peasant to that extravagant story of yours, and now they would highly doubt you if you just decided to reveal that your heritage consists within the background of 2 royal families, both of which are millennia's past. True. Not only that, there's also the fact that we're hiding much more of us than what we appear to be. And we originate from Hai no Kuni, what these people know as the Fire Nation, which they probably hate the people of with extreme passion. Again, true. So then why are you so damn happy? Hey, it'll all work out in the end, won't it? Besides, you and I both know that when the assault on this place happens 2 days from now, we'll be forced to reveal who we really are and what we're really capable of. Just imagine the looks of their faces when they see someone else being able to bend all 4 elements on a whim other than their precious messiah. I'll agree with you there, that shouldn't be funny. Can't believe I almost forgot that things usually work in our favor in the end nearly all the time, even if we fucked up everything up in the beginning. Then again, there was that time where we failed to stop the utter destruction of the world through the hands of a genocidal, maniacal 80-year-old man. Really bad example. Hey, it was one of the only times I can think of where our fuck-ups actually ended up actually screwing us over than helping us. And considering how many times you've caused us to go up shit creek without a paddle, I'd say that's a pretty good scoreboard. But that's one really big loss, wouldn't you say? Beggars can't be choosers, kid. I suppose what do you think about you starting to like me? She said if the strength you believe she has yet to inherit fails, that she would have liked to marry someone like you instead of Han. That doesn't mean she likes you explicitly. But doesn't that give off the implication that she'd at least be interested in me given the chance? I guess so. If the first person who ends up falling for you in this new world is a friggin' princess, then I gotta say, things cannot possibly go wrong for the both of us in the future. Glad to see we agree on that much at least. Hey, self-proclaimed messiah dead ahead, kid. Naruto looked up to see Avatar Aang talking with Sokka's sister, with both teens looking rather solemn, though out of the duo Katara appeared the more troubled. Walking up to them, the two turned their heads at the sound of approaching footsteps, flashing a brief smile upon seeing Naruto's visage. Hey, you two both look kind of down. What's up? Pakin not going to train to bend water more fluently? Naruto asked casually, with Aang shaking his head in quick response. No, he's agreed to train me all. I'm just a bit apprehensive about it. Plus, there's another issue, Aang said, as his voice trailed off, looking at Katara. As he finished his sentence, Naruto shrugged and rolled his shoulders at Aang's statement and smiled slowly behind his mask. You're a bit apprehensive about what's to come under your tutelage under Paku. It's a bit understandable, given how much of a stiff the guy is. What's the other issue though? Naruto questioned calmly, earning an irritated and disheartened look from Katara. I knew when we came here it was of vital importance to find Aang a master to study under, but I hope to find one, as well to improve my waterbending abilities as well. Paku declined rather rudely to train me, and then I questioned whether I could train under the other lesser masters, only for him to shut down my hopes, and tell me that apparently for a woman to use waterbending other than to be a healer is against the law here. Apparently tradition here states that only men here can waterbending warriors, Katara said, as she practically spat out her last sentence, to which Naruto could understand her anger. I mean, I thought once we came the chauvinism from my tribe wouldn't exist here too, but it turns out it's even worse here than it was in my own home. The dark-skinned beauty mumbled sadly. Naruto shook his head in disbelief, and sighed loudly to voice his discomfort with the issue. What a load of shit. A lot of females from my village of Baroshi were earthbenders, and some of them got pretty damn aggressive. More than enough to floor me given the chance. To judge a warrior by their gender is inexcusable ignorance. Tradition be damned. Katara perked up at Naruto's opinion, a look of question upon her face. Really? Do you believe so? I can honestly say that such an opinion is pretty rare amongst a lot of the men I've met, minus my own father, Aang, and an earthbender I met named Haru. I'm glad men like you and Aang have the integrity not to outcast women from the battlefield just because of our gender. A shame Paku has forgotten how vicious a properly trained female fighter can be. Tell you what, wanna hear me out with an offer? Naruto said somewhat mischievously, as Aang pondered his inquiry curiously. What offer is that? The Avatar asked. Simple. After hours when everyone is asleep, the three of us have a little waterbending session of our own. No sexist old men to tell Katara here how she can't waterbend. Naruto started with his arms folded in determination, while Katara pumped her arms to the side in agreement. Aang and I actually were talking about the same idea. You're pretty wily, Naruto, I'll give you that. Katara smirked, earning a large grin from the sage in response, much to Aang's small discomfort. The Avatar stepped forward and cleared his throat to announce his own opinion, one that he already shared with Katara. What if we get caught? If someone finds us waterbending, that would usually be okay for Naruto or me due to our gender. But if we're found bending in unison with Katara, all of us could get kicked out of this tribe. As a result, that would mean there'd be little chance for me to find a good waterbending master outside of the Northern Water Tribe. Traveling halfway around the world would have meant nothing, and they may even try to cast Naruto here into the ocean, considering he doesn't have any method of transportation out of here. Naruto frowned, as did Katara, before the blonde shook his head in defiance. We'll do the best we can to be quiet, and not have a very outlandish training session. And even if we got caught, and they tried to kick due to the fact that you're waterbending with us, Katara, I'll fight every one of their warriors with my bare fists if I have to. Katara couldn't help but laugh at Naruto's statement. It wasn't a mocking chuckle, but the sheer fact that she honestly believed Naruto meant what he said. Naruto, as good of a bender you are through the water and earth styles, I don't think you could take more than 100 elite waterbenders down by yourself. And then there's the fact that Paku is a waterbending master at that, and he'd undoubtedly be leading them if you tried to fight them all. A fight against one or a fight against many. My resolve is stronger than all of theirs put together. It's all a matter of willpower, Katara. They can throw as many men as they want at me if they like. It won't help them win in the end though. Numbers are meaningless. One determined man can take out 100 opponents if he had the resolve to. Naruto proclaimed, letting a bit of his bravado show, having been continually modest the whole time he was there. He didn't like to brag that he was one of the strongest people he knew, if not the strongest person in the entire world at its present time period. Though going around telling everybody he was the best there was would have probably made him a lot of enemies to begin with. Hence why the sage decided to swallow his pride and tone himself down a bit for the people around him. Alright, we can still go through with our plan, but let's try to be quiet about it, okay? Aang inquired politely, earning a nod from Katara and a smirk from Naruto underneath his mask. Let's just walk around till nightfall, guys. It won't be much longer till it gets dark anyway. The blonde put out in the open, the dark-skinned girl, and the tattooed boy both nodded in agreement in response. As the trio started to walk away, Katara turned to Naruto suddenly, and the blonde nearly tripped over in the process. Hey Naruto, have you seen my brother and Princess Yu? I know she wanted to go out for a walk to get away from that idiot Han, and seeing how my brother has been smitten by the mere sight of her, I'm guessing she offered to go along with her. Your brother and Princess Yu found me near the pier shortly after I met Aang's flying bison, Appa. I must say the beast is a very dignified, respectable creature. He was a bit apprehensive of me at first, and then within the next 5 minutes he was letting me scratch his ears. Naruto noted, much to Aang's surprise. If Appa likes you, Naruto, that must mean you're a good person, Naruto. Otherwise he wouldn't be so accepting of your present. Aang commented on a genuine matter. As for your brother, he had some plan of taking you off on a sunset flight on Appa's back. I'm honestly surprised she doesn't know he likes her yet. Think he'll try to pull off some goofy romantic one-liners on her while they're up there? Naruto laughed. As they walked onward, Katara joined him in his laughter, all too well aware of how her brother had constantly tried to flirt with the girls of the tribe back at their own home, which usually ended up with a red smack mark across the face. 4 hours later. Naruto stood against a pillar amongst the dark, watching as Katara and Aang waterbend back and forth. When they had questioned him why he wasn't participating immediately, he merely responded that he wanted to see their own abilities first before they saw any more of his. From what the sage was witnessing, the two teens had a very basic understanding of the water-style element within itself. Katara ever so slightly more than Aang, but that was to be expected given the Avatar was yet to master all of the 4 known elements of the current world. Katara seemed a bit more focused during the session, but any person who was present during her small argument with Paku could have told you it was probably due to her anger towards his chauvinism, and in spite of the sexist traditions in general. Naruto stepped forward, clapping slowly and softly, as both teens turned their heads to him. You guys do have a pretty good grip on waterbending in particular, but you still need a bit of work. That's why we came all the way here, only to have that belligerent old fart shut me down. At least Aang gets to be taught. Katara spat slightly, still fuming that in her own part she had been shut down after traveling across one end of the earth to the other. Perhaps not. I could teach you a bit of what I know of waterbending, things my mother Nahana taught me," Naruto exclaimed, while Katara's eyes widened in interest. "Really? You'd do that for me?" Katara asked. "But of course, if some sexist old geezer isn't gonna teach you, I don't see why I shouldn't when I'm perfectly capable of doing so," Naruto quipped, to which Aang stepped forth to question him. "But can your skills really measure up to a master like Paku? Even if he is grumpy, he's still a master," Aang stated. Naruto rolled his eyes, slapping his hands together back and forth as he prepared himself. "I may not be a master, but I can sure as hell hold my own in a fair fight, sometimes even an unfair fight. Watch this and learn carefully." Naruto began to concentrate, humming in a very low note as he gained composure. He let out a very low sigh as water began building at the edge of his fingertips. As the condensation began accumulating, he whispered in a very low voice a jutsu he had learned from his time in Kirigakure. "Sushin, Akua Buredo no Jutsu." Within seconds, a 4-foot-long blade of pure water formed from Naruto's fingertips, being kept in its sword-like yet lucid shape in place by the chakra of the blonde alone. The two couldn't help but gasp slightly as Naruto held the water in place. None of the water that had formed it was dropping to the ground. It remained solid yet fluid at the same time. "Whoa, that's so cool!" Aang exclaimed rather loudly, quickly being shushed by Katara out of fear of being discovered. "How are you able to keep its shape solid like a sword, but fluid like water at the same time? It doesn't make any sense. It's a pure contradiction of physics," Katara proclaimed, earning a smirk from Naruto. "That's pretty easy to explain actually. I'm using my chakra to hold the water in place, as the shape I want it to be, but through my manipulation of the aquatic elements I'm having it maintain a lucid shape rather than a solid one. Simply put, I'm using my own chakra to pressurize the water into a physical form, but not one of solid ice. I've given it shape without shape," Naruto responded, as he moved his right hand slightly from left to right, demonstrating how the water would not fly from his fingertips, and he could control it at a whim. Katara grew another look of question on her face, to which Naruto expected when he used a word unknown to her. "Chakra? Don't you mean chi?" "I knew someone would ask about that eventually. Chakra is the hidden energy of a person's shape. It's much more potent than chi, but not as bountiful in comparison to how much of it a person has. It's much harder to manipulate, and strenuous to master completely. Many people don't even know what chakra is because hardly anyone has the skill to employ it in battle anymore." "Then how do you?" Aang questioned. "My father Abad was a traveling warrior monk of the Earth Kingdom's tallest mountains before he fell in love with my mother Baroshi when their paths crossed. As a monk he knew much of chakra control, and he passed much of his knowledge down to me. Even though I nearly have chakra control down, I'm still not an expert at controlling it like my father was," the sage stated, as his ocean of lies continued to grow, feeling slightly guilty about the fact that he had to give false information to anyone who questioned him about his past. His lie about how he was not the master his father was in chakra control was perhaps his greatest lie. From what Naruto knew, he had surpassed his own real father in every way, including that of chakra control, which was a grand feat within itself due to the fact his father was called Shinobi no Kami, the god of shinobi, a title only given previously to Sarutobi Hiruzen, the Sandaime Hokage of Konoha. "Wow, you're really lucky to have been taught such things at such a young age," Katara exclaimed, somewhat jealous that Naruto had manipulated a stronger body energy than nearly everyone else employed. "Is it possible to master that technique without using chakra, and using chi to power it instead?" Aang asked curiously, wondering if he could learn such a technique as well. Naruto chuckled a little, and moved the blade casually across the ground, watching in amusement how the pressurized water easily cut through the icy floor below them with little trouble. It'd be quite difficult to maintain this sort of technique with chi alone, given how chakra is a much more potent energy source that allows one to manipulate elements on a greater level. Plus, I don't think you'd want to learn this technique due to your shared pacifism. If it can cut this easily, imagine how easily it could cut through a person. One stroke would be the only attack needed to end an average man's life. Their faces quickly stiffened at the thought of directly killing someone, something Naruto had mainly plainly clear he had no moral dilemma with. As Naruto raised his hand up towards his chest, the lucid sword suddenly froze completely. The shimmering water that bubbled from Naruto's fingertips had connected to his hand. Katara and Aang looked on with a look of astonishment, while the sage himself didn't look the least bit pleased. "How'd you do that? Another chakra-related technique?" Katara questioned. "If I wished to, I could have frozen the water pulsing from my hand, but I did no such thing. I suspect that we have a visitor," Naruto grimly added, looking up from where had detected a use of chi. Standing there was Master Paku, bearing an angered, disappointed look upon his face. Needless to say, Katara and Aang were petrified that they had been discovered. Naruto, on the other hand, appeared more annoyed than anything. "You three have disrespected me, my teachings, and my entire culture," Paku said darkly, his eyes as cold as the ice he stood on. "But you are no longer welcome here among this tribe, or as my student, Avatar. I will see that Chieftain Arnuk send you and your friends on your way tomorrow morning. Until then you are to be confined to your quarters." The waterbending master spat, as he interrupted Aang, who now bore a very disheartened look while Katara herself gritted her teeth in anger. "And you foreigner, you will be thrown out of this village, as well the following morning. Let's hope the Avatar lets you aboard his bison or you'll have to swim all the way back." The old man implied darkly. Naruto couldn't help but smirk underneath his mask despite the man's obviously serious tone. "What's the matter with Aji-san? Afraid that a properly trained female bender would whoop your shriveled old can?" Naruto cackled, much to the horror of his two new friends. They knew they were already in trouble, but the blonde didn't seem to care in the least. In fact, he seemed to want to aggravate Pakku even further. "I'll make sure Chieftain Arnuk prepares a much harsher treatment to reward you for your impudence, boy. Let's see how you like spending 3 months in our jail, and then having to swim all the way back home after." Pakku grinned. "No prison you could ever build could even dream to hold me." Naruto growled aggressively. "Your bravado does you no credit. It only shows how desperate of a coward you are. You three will follow me. Now, I will escort you to your quarters," Pakku angrily stated. Aang and Katara lowered their heads in disappointment as they were hauled off to where they would be confined for the night. As the somber walk began, Naruto could hear an all too familiar voice ringing in his head. "Hey Kit, why don't we just level his ass here and now? We can totally take this belligerent team down a peg." "True, but remember, we're still on a reconnaissance mission. We will not expose ourselves no matter the cost." "Fine, I think we can teach him a lesson tomorrow though. You know, one that involves us kicking his wrinkled backside all over the village? That is a certainty, Kurama. Excellent looks, tomorrow we get to have some real fun for once." "Indeed, but let's cool our jets for now. We can lie in wait and rest for what is to come." "Very well. Oh, and by the way, Kit." "Yes, Kurama? Fuck up number 1 for our second life." "Shut the hell up." Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic. Link is in the description. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.